Amid the sharp clink of crystal glasses in the mansion, my wife adjusted her lover's tie and sneered, "Don't give those documents to him. He's only good for mopping floors. His slow brain couldn't handle numbers like ours." Laughter rippled through the room as they looked at me like a useless man living off her shine. But she didn't know the obedient smile on my lips was already her death sentence. Because the safe I had just opened revealed the truth, the anonymous chairman she had been begging for investment for 10 years was the same foolish husband pouring her wine. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we begin, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to stay silent about something important, waiting for the right moment to speak? Your perspective might help someone else reading this. Note: some details are adjusted for storytelling, but the lesson about truth and timing is what matters most. I stood at the marble counter in my apron, setting down fresh mango slices, when my wife descended the staircase and said the words that would change everything. "Even breathing here is free for you." Celeste Sinclair, 58, descended the curved staircase in cream silk phone already pressed to her ear, barely glancing at the breakfast I had prepared. Her heels clicked against Italian tile as she crossed the kitchen manicured hand, reaching past the fruit arrangement to grab her coffee, black no sugar, exactly as I had made it for the past 32 years. "Don't forget to pick up my dry cleaning," she said, still not looking at me. The phone conversation continued without pause. "No, Celine, tell them we need the finalization by mid-December at the latest. Yes, I understand the timeline. I am Lawrence Sinclair, 60 years old, and I have spent the better part of 3 decades perfecting the art of being invisible in my own home." The beachfront villa in Palm Beach stretched around us like a museum dedicated to wealth I was never supposed to question. Celeste built her healthcare management empire while I kept the household running with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. That was our arrangement. That was what worked. "What time should I have dinner ready?" I asked, my voice carrying the practiced tone of a man who had learned when to speak and when to simply exist quietly. "I'll eat at the office. Don't wait up." She left without touching the mango, the perfectly toasted brioche, the soft scrambled eggs I had timed to finish exactly as she descended the stairs. The door closed. The house settled into the particular silence that comes when you are alone in a space built for two. I cleared the untouched breakfast with methodical precision, scraping food into the disposal, rinsing plates, wiping down surfaces until the kitchen gleamed. This was my life. This was normal. The humiliation had become so routine that I barely registered it anymore, just another data point in a marriage that had calcified into performance art somewhere around year 15. My phone buzzed at 8:15. The voicemail icon glowed on the screen. I dried my hands on the kitchen towel and pressed play, expecting a reminder about Celeste's dry cleaning, or perhaps a call from our landscaper. "Mr. Sinclair, this is Teresa Henderson from First Palm Trust Wealth Management. I'm calling regarding the account structure change authorization currently in our system. The file is entering final verification this week, with processing deadline set for 10 business days from today. Please confirm receipt of this notification at your earliest convenience. Our direct line is I listened to the message twice. Account structure change authorization. I had authorized nothing. For 32 years, Celeste had handled our finances with the understanding that my role was domestic supportive, quietly present. I signed what she asked me to sign, nodded when she explained investment strategies in the tone one uses with a child, and maintained the household accounts she allocated to me with careful precision. It was easier that way. It kept the peace. But I had never in 3 decades received a direct call from our wealth management bank about account structure changes. How long does it take for silence to become a weapon, for submission to become a disguise? I set the phone down on the counter and stood very still, listening to the house around me. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked. Ocean waves crashed against the private beach beyond the terrace. Everything was exactly as it always was, except for the small, cold fact that someone had filed authorization paperwork in my name without telling me. I walked to the villa's home office, my space, though Celeste rarely acknowledged I had one. The room was smaller than her executive suite tucked into the west wing, where morning light barely reached. I unlocked the filing cabinet in the corner, the one piece of furniture in this entire house that Celeste had never asked about, never searched, never questioned. Inside were documents most house husbands don't keep: corporate formation papers, stock certificates, shareholder agreements from companies. Celeste believed she managed independently, believed she had built through her own brilliance and strategic vision. She had built them. I would never deny her talent, her drive, her ruthless efficiency in business. But she had built them with capital. I provided on infrastructure I designed, using corporate structures I had established years before we met. The anonymous chairman who signed off on her major decisions, who she reported to quarterly, who she complained about over dinner when she thought I was too ignorant to understand the corporate politics she described. That was me. The filing cabinet held more than documents. It held the truth Celeste had forgotten. I built this empire before I ever met her. I selected a single folder, innocuous corporate filing paperwork, that would mean nothing to anyone at her office. Just a concerned husband delivering forgotten documents. The perfect excuse to visit her healthcare management suite in Palm Beach Gardens, to observe, to understand what authorization had been filed and why I was only learning about it through a bank's courtesy notification. 25 years of marriage. 25 years of playing small, of letting her believe I was the dependent one, the man who needed her wealth and status to maintain the lifestyle I enjoyed. She had convinced herself so thoroughly of this narrative that she stopped seeing me entirely. I became furniture, wallpaper, a convenient domestic manager who kept her personal life running smoothly while she conquered boardrooms. She forgot that furniture observes everything, that wallpaper hears every conversation, that the man she dismissed as helpless might simply be waiting. I closed the filing cabinet, tucked the folder under my arm, and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. Gray hair, soft features, the slight stoop of a man who spent his days in service rather than command. Perfect. Time to visit my wife's office and see exactly who thought they were playing this game. The voicemail had confirmed what I had begun to suspect over the past few weeks. The late dinners, the distracted conversations, Celeste's particular brand of cruelty sharpening from casual to calculated. Someone was moving pieces on a board they didn't know I controlled. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door. Just a concerned husband delivering forgotten paperwork. Nothing suspicious about that at all. The receptionist barely looked up when I walked into Celeste's healthcare management office, carrying the manila folder, playing the part I had perfected over 25 years, the forgettable husband. The building rose from Palm Beach Gardens in sleek glass and steel, all modern efficiency and corporate polish. I had been here perhaps 3 times in the past decade for holiday parties, where I stood quietly by the punch bowl for the occasional emergency where Celeste needed something retrieved from home. The staff knew me the way you know, furniture present but unremarkable. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," I said to the young woman at the reception desk, offering an apologetic smile. "My wife forgot these files at home this morning. Is she available?" The receptionist, maybe 25, glanced at the folder with the bored efficiency of someone who had processed 1,000 interruptions. "Mrs. Sinclair is in her office, down the hall, last door on the left." "Thank you so much. I won't be long." She had already returned to her computer screen, dismissing me from her awareness with the ease of someone who had categorized me as irrelevant. I walked down the corridor with the careful posture of a man who knew his place, shoulders slightly stooped, manila folder held against my chest like a shield. The hallway stretched ahead in polished marble and recessed lighting doors marked with titles that spoke of hierarchy and power. Regional Director, Operations Manager, Executive Vice President of Strategic Planning. All positions within the company I had capitalized. All salaries paid from accounts I technically controlled. All corporate decisions that crossed my desk quarterly for anonymous approval. But here in this building, I was just Celeste's husband, the man who brought forgotten documents and apologized for existing. 25 years playing small. Let me see what happens when invisible people start watching. I passed open office doors, glimpsing employees bent over computers, conference rooms filled with afternoon meetings, the machinery of corporate life grinding forward with practiced efficiency. Everything looked exactly as a successful healthcare management company should look: professional, prosperous, legitimate. Then I saw her. Solene Redmond sat at a desk position just outside Celeste's office door, too close to be a standard assistant station, too territorial to be coincidental. She was 35, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a charcoal suit that spoke of expensive taste and careful presentation. Her desk held a single monitor, a designer lamp, and a smartphone that her hand hovered over with the readiness of a soldier near a weapon. She looked up as I approached, and her expression shifted through a series of calculations I recognized from years of watching corporate predators assess threats. Can I help you? Her voice carried the polite edge of someone performing courtesy while planning defense. Just bringing my wife some documents she forgot, I said, maintaining the harmless smile. I won't be long. Mrs. Sinclair is in a private meeting. You should wait. Not, she'll be free in a moment. Not, let me check her schedule. A direct command to stop delivered with the authority of someone protecting territory that belonged to her. Invisibility is a superpower when people forget that quiet doesn't mean blind. I had seen that look before, the territorial awareness of a person guarding intimate access. The way Celine positioned herself between me and Celeste's door, the protective tension in her shoulders, the proprietary quality in her tone when she said Mrs. Sinclair instead of your wife. She wasn't protecting her boss. She was protecting her lover. Of course, I said, offering the apologetic smile again. I'll just leave these on her desk, if that's all right. I know how she gets when she's missing documents. Celine hesitated, caught between maintaining her guard and acknowledging the reasonableness of the request. Fine, but be quick. I walked past her desk, moving with the careful deference of a man who understood his place in the hierarchy. Celeste's office door stood partially ajar, voices murmuring beyond the threshold. I raised my hand to knock, then paused. Through the side window, the one with blinds tilted open just enough I saw them. Celeste stood facing Celine, their bodies closer than any professional relationship warranted. Celine's hand rested on Celeste's waist, with the casual intimacy of someone who had touched that waist many times before. Their foreheads nearly touched, and Celeste leaned into the contact with the kind of ease that comes only from habit, from comfort, from something that has been happening for longer than a moment. Not here? Celeste said, her voice carrying through the partially open door. Someone might see. Your husband doesn't notice anything, Celine replied, her hand sliding lower. He's harmless. I watched for exactly 15 seconds, long enough to commit every detail to memory, not so long that someone might notice me standing frozen in the hallway. November 28th, 2:37 p.m. Private office, northwest window. Celine's hand on Celeste's waist. Intimate positioning. Celeste leaning into contact. Overheard statement. Your husband doesn't notice anything. Evidence documented. The folder in my hand suddenly felt heavier, not with documents, with decisions. I turned and walked away without making a sound, my footsteps silent on the marble floor. My breathing controlled my expression, carefully neutral. Past Celine's desk, she had returned to her monitor, satisfied that she had established dominance over the harmless husband. Past the conference rooms and office doors and all the machinery of corporate success. The receptionist looked up as I passed. All set. She's in a meeting, I said, still holding the folder. I'll try again later. Another polite smile. Another dismissal. I walked out into the late afternoon sunlight and crossed the parking garage to my car with the measured steps of a man who had nothing to hide and nowhere urgent to be. Inside the car, I sat for 3 full minutes, not crying, not shouting, not feeling much of anything except the cold, familiar sensation of strategy crystallizing around observed facts. I opened the voice recorder app on my phone and spoke 4 words into the quiet, November 28th, call Dashel. My adopted son worked in corporate security and digital forensics. He would know what to look for. More importantly, he would know how to look without leaving traces. The affair wasn't about love. I had suspected as much the moment I received Teresa Henderson's voicemail about unauthorized account structure changes. Celeste didn't do anything without strategic purpose. If she was risking her reputation, her marriage, her carefully constructed professional image, it was because the prize was worth more than sentiment, something far more valuable than love. Something worth approximately $100 million in life insurance corporate assets and carefully hidden wealth. I started the car and pulled out of the parking garage, heading home to begin documenting everything. The leather notebook had sat in my private filing cabinet for 5 years unopened, waiting for the moment when careful observation would matter more than loud accusations. I drove home from Celeste's office in deliberate silence, the radio off my mind, cataloging facts with the precision I'd once used to audit corporate divisions for irregularities. November 28th, 2:37 p.m. Physical contact observed. Territorial behavior from the assistant. Overheard statement suggesting my perceived harmlessness. The villa felt different when I entered through the side door, bypassing the kitchen, where Celeste would expect me to prepare dinner. I moved directly to my private office, the small room in the west wing, that she had dismissed years ago as my project space, without ever asking what projects I worked on there. The filing cabinet sat in the corner, innocuous gray metal that matched 1,000 other office fixtures. I unlocked it with the key I kept on my personal keyring, the one Celeste had never shown interest in, and removed the leather-bound notebook from the bottom drawer. It was expensive leather, the kind that ages well that holds ink without bleeding through pages. I had purchased it during my last year as a corporate investigator before I met Celeste, before I decided that building an empire quietly was more valuable than climbing corporate ladders loudly. I opened to the first blank page and began documenting with the methodical precision of someone who had spent decades building cases that would hold up in court. November 28, 2024, 2:37 p.m. Healthcare Management Office, Palm Beach Gardens. Subjects, CS and SR. Physical contact observed hand on waist, intimate proximity. Overheard dialogue, quote, "Your husband doesn't notice anything. He's harmless." Duration of observation, 15 seconds, emotional state controlled. 25 years ago, I had documented safety violations in cold storage facilities the same way. Evidence first, emotion never. The habit returned like muscle memory, clinical precise, building a foundation that could support the weight of consequences. But documentation alone wasn't enough. I needed to know what they had been doing with my name, my credentials, my carefully maintained anonymity. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I trusted completely. Dashiell Sinclair answered on the second ring. My adopted son, 28 years old, had inherited my strategic mind and turned it toward digital systems instead of corporate structures. He worked as a cybersecurity specialist for a consulting firm that handled forensic investigations for Fortune 500 companies, the kind of work that required clearance discretion and the ability to find patterns in data that others missed. "Dashiell, I need you to run a system audit, not a routine check, a forensic audit." His voice shifted immediately from casual to professional. No questions about why I was calling at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. No demands for emotional context. Just the careful focus of someone who understood that when I used that tone, something serious was happening. What am I looking for? Authentication tampering, secondary accounts, access logs showing midnight activity, and anything filed or authorized using my credentials that I didn't personally approve. A pause. 2 seconds of silence where I knew Dashiell was processing the implications. Corporate accounts too, or just family. Everything. If someone's moving money or changing authorizations, I want timestamps, device, IDs, and IP addresses. Corporate fraud and marital betrayal have one thing in common. They both leave digital fingerprints if you know where to look. "I'll need account numbers and date ranges," Dashiell said, and I heard the sound of a keyboard already clicking in the background. "And authentication protocols, are we talking two-factor biometric or both?" "Both. Primary accounts use fingerprint plus rotating token. Secondary verification requires physical device authentication. Check for any device registrations I didn't personally authorize." Time frame. That past 6 months, but focus on the last 90 days. More keyboard sounds. Dashiell was already working, already pulling up systems, already doing what he did best, finding truth in data that people thought they had hidden. "I'm remoting into the corporate security system now," he said. "Need your admin credentials to access the authentication server logs." I rattled off a 16-character password from memory, the kind of password that Celeste had once laughed at as excessive when she saw me typing it. She thought I was paranoid. She didn't understand that security isn't paranoia. It's planning for the moment when trust becomes a liability. "That's got it," Dashiell said. "Running queries now against access logs. This is going to take a few hours. I'll call you when I find something." "Thank you." "Dad." His voice softened slightly, the professional mask cracking just enough to let concern through. "Should I be worried?" "Yes," I said, "but not about me." He understood. Dashiell never asked why I needed the audit. That's the difference between a son who trusts you and a wife who's been lying for years. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my office, the leather notebook open on the desk, the filing cabinet still unlocked beside me. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the Palm Beach coastline, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that Celeste would have called beautiful if she'd been here to notice. But she wasn't here. She was still at her office, probably still with Celine, probably still planning whatever they had been planning for the past however many months. I opened my laptop and began cross-referencing dates. The voicemail from Teresa Henderson about account structure changes. The timeline Celeste had mentioned on the phone that morning about finalization by mid-December. The increasing frequency of her late nights at the office over the past 3 months. Patterns emerged. They always do if you look long enough with the right tools. My phone rang. 20 minutes. Dashiell had said it would take hours, but he was calling back in 20 minutes, and the speed of the callback told me he'd found something significant enough that waiting didn't make sense. "Dad, you need to see this." His voice carried the careful control of someone delivering bad news to a client. "Someone's been accessing your accounts at 2 a.m. for the past 3 months, and they're using an authentication device that's definitely not yours." I closed the leather notebook and pulled the laptop closer. "Send me everything." Already compiling the report. "But Dad, this isn't random access. It's systematic. They're checking specific accounts on specific schedules, and they're good at covering their tracks. If I hadn't been looking for authentication device mismatches, I might have missed it." "How good?" "Professional good. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing." The affair was just the surface. Whatever Celeste and Solene were doing, it had been planned for months, executed with precision, and designed to be invisible to someone who wasn't actively looking. But I was looking now, and I was very, very good at finding things people tried to hide. The timestamp log on Dashiell's screen showed 87 unauthorized access attempts across 3 months, every single one, occurring between 200 and 2:47 a.m., the hours when I had always slept most deeply. Dashiell had sent the screen share link at 8:30 that morning, and now I sat watching evidence compile into an undeniable pattern. Red markers indicated login events, blue showed account modifications, yellow highlighted notification setting changes. Every access happened between 2 and 3 a.m., Dashiell said, using the professional detachment he reserved for client presentations. Notification settings changed to silent on all primary accounts. Email alerts suppressed. SMS confirmations redirected to a secondary number. The cursor moved across the screen, highlighting specific entries. Someone knew your sleep schedule. They knew exactly when you wouldn't be checking your phone, when you wouldn't notice login confirmations. "The secondary account," I said. "What permissions does it have?" Dashiell pulled up another window, scrolling through authorization hierarchies. "It's full beneficiary change authority, and it's been active since May. Dad, this wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. They've been building infrastructure for 6 months. 6 months of midnight theft while I slept 15 feet away. IP addresses. Most traced to locations you've never visited. Coffee shops in Boca Raton. A business center in West Palm. One hotel lobby in Fort Lauderdale. All public Wi-Fi networks with no security cameras. Professional, careful, planned. And the authentication device. Spoofed. They cloned your credentials, probably physical access to your device, long enough to extract cryptographic keys. Then they registered a duplicate under a modified serial number. The system saw it as legitimate because the authentication tokens matched. How long does it take to erase a person? 5 years of small humiliations? Or 6 months of midnight theft? The phrase "knew your sleep schedule" triggered a memory. Villa Terrace, summer evening, 5 years ago, 2019. Celeste had hosted a dinner party with Palm Beach Society friends. 8 guests around the outdoor table, string lights casting soft shadows. I had been clearing dessert plates when Celeste steered conversation toward family planning. "We've tried everything, of course," she said, her voice carrying theatrical concern. "But when certain biological limitations exist, there's only so much modern medicine can do." One of the guests shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure it's difficult for both of you." Celeste sighed, placing her hand over her heart. "Oh, I've made peace with it. Lawrence is still adjusting to his weaknesses." The dinner guests' 8 Palm Beach Society acquaintances shifted uncomfortably in their terrace seats as Celeste weaponized vulnerability, turning intimate medical details into public theater. I stood holding an empty plate, saying nothing, while she systematically dismantled my dignity under the guise of concerned sharing. 2 days later, I found the contraceptive prescription in her bathroom cabinet. 5 years of continuous dosing. The infertility wasn't my failure. It was her choice. But by then everyone we knew believed her story. "That you still there?" Dashiell's voice pulled me back to the present, to the screen full of markers. "The infertility story," I said slowly. "She told everyone it was my fault. But I found medical records 3 years ago. She was taking contraceptives the entire time. Silence. Then Dashiell's voice, quieter now. And why would she do that? Same reason she's doing this now. Make me feel weak. Make me feel dependent. Make everyone believe I'm less capable than I actually am. Then make me disappear. The medical records I'd found 3 years ago hadn't been a shock. They'd been confirmation that I'd been right to stop trusting my own memory of our marriage. The pattern crystallized. Public humiliation disguised as sympathy. Private manipulation of medical reality. Digital theft conducted while I slept. Every tactic served the same goal: systematically erode my identity until there was nothing left to defend. Celeste had been practicing erasure for years. The midnight access logs weren't new behavior. They were just the financial version of what she'd been doing psychologically since the beginning. "What do you need from me?" Dashiell asked. "Everything you can find. Access logs, IP, addresses, device signatures, timestamp correlations. I want a forensic report that would hold up in court. You're going to confront her. Eventually, but not until I understand the complete scope." Dashiell's voice shifted, and I heard the tone that meant he'd found something else. "There's one more thing. The secondary account has a pending authorization request. It's scheduled to process in 9 days. 9 days. I pulled up my private files, the encrypted ones Celeste didn't know existed. Corporate structure documents, trust agreements, insurance policies. And there it was. Key person life insurance policy. Coverage amount $100 million. Original beneficiary Dashiell Sinclair as primary heir. Pending beneficiary change request. Processing deadline December 7th. I scrolled down to see the proposed new beneficiary. Celeste Sinclair, primary, 100%. The cold feeling in my chest solidified into something sharp and focused. This wasn't about an affair. This wasn't about love or passion or revenge. This was about money, about making sure that when I died or disappeared or was declared incompetent or whatever they had planned, every dollar I'd ever earned would flow to Celeste instead of to the son I'd chosen to inherit my empire. 9 days until the authorization processed. 9 days to decide whether to confront immediately or build a case so airtight that confrontation became unnecessary. I looked at the screen full of evidence, at the timeline stretching back 6 months, at the pattern of systematic theft and psychological manipulation. Celeste thought she was erasing me. She had no idea she'd been leaving evidence the entire time. The manila envelope had been filed under medical resolved for 3 years, sealed with tape I'd placed there myself, the day I decided some truths were too painful to keep reviewing. 9 days until the insurance beneficiary change processed. 9 days until Celeste legally positioned herself to inherit everything if something happened to me. But before I could understand what they were planning, I needed to confirm what I'd been denying for a decade. I pulled the envelope from my private filing cabinet, feeling the weight of documents I'd deliberately archived to avoid confronting their implications. The seal broke with a sound like tearing skin. Inside were pharmacy receipts, prescription records, and billing statements I'd collected quietly over years of suspicion but never acted upon. 7 years of evidence from 2015 to 2022, each page documenting a truth I'd chosen not to see. The first receipt was dated March 2019. Prescription refill, birth control, patient Celeste Sinclair, physician Dr. Morrison, date March 12, 2019. Dr. Morrison, the physician whose name appeared on 7 years of contraceptive prescriptions, had unknowingly provided the paper trail that would expose Celeste's decade-long deception. March 2019, the same month she'd told her friends at that dinner party we'd been trying for 2 years. I spread the documents across my desk, chronologically creating a timeline of methodical betrayal. Each prescription refill told a story. Each date marked a moment when Celeste had been maintaining her deception while publicly performing grief over our childless marriage. July 2017, October 2018, March 2019, June 2020. Every single year. Never missed a refill. One receipt showed a pharmacy in West Palm Beach, dated August 15, 2020. I pulled up my phone's calendar and scrolled back. 2 days before that prescription, Celeste had sat across from me at breakfast and said, "We should stop trying and accept reality." I'd believed her. I'd nodded sympathetically. I'd agreed that perhaps we weren't meant to be parents, that perhaps my body was simply incapable of what hers deserved. The memory surfaced with crystalline clarity. The fertility specialist's office 3 years ago. modern furniture, abstract art on the walls, a desk between us and Dr. Reynolds, who specialized in unexplained infertility. Celeste had cried, real tears streaming down her face as Dr. Reynolds explained that sometimes despite testing, despite treatment, despite everything medicine could offer, conception simply didn't happen. "We've run every test," Dr. Reynolds had said, his voice gentle with practiced sympathy. "There's no medical explanation we can find." Because he was testing the wrong person, Celeste had made sure of that. She'd cried, and I'd held her hand through every fake tear, believing we were sharing grief when she was performing a script she'd written years earlier. How many lies can one person maintain simultaneously? Turns out the answer is as many as it takes to steal a fortune. I pulled another document from the envelope. Pharmacy billing statement from 2016 showing 3 refills that year. Each one filled at a different location across Palm Beach County, Boca Raton, Jupiter, West Palm Beach. Never the same pharmacy twice in a row. Never anywhere I might accidentally encounter the pharmacist. Always when I was traveling for business. I cross-referenced the prescription dates against my old calendars, the ones I kept digitally backed up out of corporate habit. Every single refill coincided with a trip. Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. She'd timed them perfectly. "I knew," I said to the empty office. Some part of me always knew. I just didn't want to believe my own wife was that calculating. But the evidence didn't lie. The receipts didn't perform. The dates didn't manipulate. I sat back in my chair looking at the chronological spread of documents. This wasn't random cruelty. This wasn't even about not wanting children. This was strategic psychological warfare. The pattern was clear, now laid out in pharmaceutical paper trails and billing codes. Make me feel defective. Make me feel dependent. Make me question my own adequacy. Erode my confidence year by year until I accepted the role she'd assigned me. The house husband who contributed nothing, who needed her wealth, who existed at her discretion. And now, with a decade of groundwork laid, she was executing the final phase. The midnight account access, the forged authorizations, the insurance beneficiary change that would transfer everything I'd built to the woman who'd spent 10 years making me feel like I'd built nothing. The worst part wasn't the lying, it was the crying. She'd cried in that fertility specialist's office, and I'd held her hand through every fake tear. I pulled out my phone and began photographing every document, every receipt, every prescription record, every billing statement, clinical documentation of systematic deception. Like 10 years. I said, the words landing in the quiet like stones dropped in deep water. She's been doing this for 10 years, making me feel like the problem while she systematically positioned herself to take everything. But she'd forgotten one thing. I hadn't built a $500 million company by ignoring evidence. I'd built it by finding patterns, documenting irregularities, and acting on facts rather than feelings. The house husband facade wasn't something that just happened. She'd engineered it, year by year, humiliation by humiliation, prescription by prescription. But facades cut both ways. She thought she was married to a passive dependent man who'd accepted his role as decorative spouse. She had no idea she was married to someone who'd spent 30 years building forensic cases against corporate criminals. I opened my phone's contact list and scrolled past Dashiell's name to someone I hadn't called in 5 years. Gerald Carpenter, private investigator, former FBI Financial Crimes Division. The kind of investigator who didn't follow cheating spouses into hotel rooms. He followed money trails into offshore accounts. Because whatever Celeste and Celine were planning, it went deeper than an affair and a forged signature. The affair was camouflage. The intimacy was distraction. The real crime was financial, and it had been in motion for months, maybe years. I needed to know how deep the fraud went. I needed to know who else was involved. I needed to know every account, every authorization, every piece of the scheme Celeste thought she'd hidden. And I needed to know it before December 7th. I pressed call and waited for Gerald Carpenter to answer. Time to see what else she'd been planning while I slept. Marcus Holloway answered on the 4th ring, his voice carrying the same careful neutrality I remembered from the corporate fraud case 5 years ago. "By Lawrence Sinclair," I said. "I need your services again." Been a while. No surprise in his tone. Marcus Holloway, the private investigator I'd used 5 years ago to expose financial fraud at a competitor's cold storage facility, specialized in following money trails, not adulterous spouses. "What kind of case?" Financial fraud, probably insurance fraud, possibly something worse. Time frame, 8 days. There's a beneficiary authorization processing on the 7th. I need to know who they're working with before it goes through. A pause, the sound of a pen clicking. My wife, her assistant, possibly others. I'm not paying you to photograph hotel rooms. I need you to follow the money, bank statements, business meetings, anyone they're consulting about financial structures. Understood. Marcus's voice shifted into the professional register I remembered. You're building a fraud case, not a custody case. I'll need account numbers, known associates, typical schedule patterns. I spent the next 20 minutes providing details. Celeste's office location, Celine's vehicle registration, the insurance policy number Dashiell had identified in the pending authorization queue. Marcus took notes with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. One more thing, I said. Whatever you find, I want documentation that would hold up in court or a boardroom. Timestamps, witnesses, paper trails. Always do. He paused. Lawrence, if this is what I think it is, insurance beneficiary fraud with an 18-day processing window, you're not just looking at civil court. You're looking at felony territory. I know. Good. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. I sat in my office for a long moment, looking at the medical evidence still spread across my desk. Then I gathered it, carefully photographed every page one more time for backup, and filed it away in the locked cabinet. Time to play the role Celeste expected. 2 days passed with me maintaining the house. Husband facade perfectly. I cooked meals with the precision she'd come to expect. I ran errands. I picked up her dry cleaning without being asked. I asked polite questions about her day, and accepted evasive answers with the patience of someone who'd never learned to demand better. The difference between a jealous husband and a corporate strategist: one hires someone to catch them in bed, the other hires someone to catch them signing contracts. Celeste grew slightly more confident. I could see it in the way she moved through the villa, the way she checked her phone less carefully, the way she smiled when she thought I wasn't looking. She was winning, or she thought she was. On the morning of December 3rd, an encrypted email from Marcus arrived with the subject line, "Financial activity confirmed." I waited until Celeste left for the office before opening it. The report began with a timeline, December 1st. Subject 1, Celeste, and Subject 2. Celine met at healthcare office, departed together at 6:30 p.m. December 2nd. Subjects met at upscale restaurant on Worth Avenue, Palm Beach, 7 p.m. Third party present. Then came the photographs. Time-stamped, geotagged, taken from a distance with the kind of telephoto lens that captured detail without proximity. Celeste and Celine sat at an outdoor table, white tablecloth, catching the evening light, palm trees swaying in the background. Worth Avenue's designer boutiques visible across the street. But they weren't alone. Seated across from them was a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit, the kind of tailored precision that spoke of serious money and professional credibility. Business cards lay on the table between them, documents spread across the white cloth, close enough to be readable if you knew what to look for. Marcus's caption identified him, Gerald Carpenter, 56 senior insurance consultant, specializing in high net worth life insurance policies and estate planning. I zoomed in on the photographs, Celeste leaning forward intently, her expression focused in a way I recognized from boardroom negotiations. Celine taking notes on a leather portfolio. Carpenter pointing to specific clauses in what appeared to be a policy document, his finger tracing lines of text I couldn't quite read. This wasn't a romantic dinner. This was a business meeting. The next photo showed them entering a hotel lobby together at 9:45 p.m. The timestamp glowed in the corner like an accusation, but Marcus's caption read, "Financial, not romantic. Observe departure patterns consistent with professional consultation, extending past restaurant close time." The hotel footage didn't make me angry. The insurance documents on that table, those made me dangerous. I scrolled through the rest of Marcus's report. 90 minutes of discussion, multiple document reviews, Carpenter producing what appeared to be comparison charts, Celeste and Celine reviewing paperwork with the intensity of people making decisions that would affect large sums of money. Marcus's final note, Subject 3. Carpenter specializes in complex beneficiary structures and estate optimization. Recommend immediate background investigation. Insurance consultant, I said to the empty office. They're not just changing the beneficiary, they're planning the whole structure with professional help. I typed a response background check Carpenter immediately and find out if there are other consultants involved. This is bigger than I thought. Marcus's reply came back within minutes, already running it. Report in 2 hours. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Palm Beach coastline. Somewhere out there, Celeste was sitting in her office, probably congratulating herself on how smoothly everything was progressing, how her harmless house husband suspected nothing, how the insurance consultant was helping them optimize the structure, how 8 days from now, everything would be in place. She had no idea I was building a case file. 2 hours later, Marcus sent the background report. Gerald Carpenter, 28 years in high net worth insurance, specializing in complex beneficiary structures and estate optimization. Licensed in Florida, New York, and California. Clean record. Professional credentials impeccable. But buried in the third paragraph was a detail that made my blood run cold. Carpenter had been investigated twice by insurance regulatory boards for facilitating questionable policy transfers, where the insured party died within 18 months of the beneficiary change. Both cases closed due to insufficient evidence. No charges filed, no professional sanctions. But the pattern was there. Insured party dies. New beneficiary collects. Carpenter collects his consultant fee. Everyone walks away clean, except the person in the ground. I read the paragraph 3 times, committing every word to memory. Then I typed 3 words back to Marcus find Celine's history. The insurance policy document Marcus forwarded was 127 pages long, but I only needed to read page 3 to understand that my wife wasn't planning a divorce, she was planning a funeral. Marcus's email had arrived at 2 p.m. with the subject line, "Complete policy documentation attached. Review beneficiary change structure immediately." I opened the file and began reading. Key person life insurance policy. Coverage amount, $100 million. Established to protect the cold storage empire's continuity in case of the death of the primary shareholder and operational director. Current beneficiary structure, corporate trust administered by Lawrence Sinclair with disbursement protocols designed to ensure business continuity and employee protection. That was the policy I remembered establishing 15 years ago, back when I was still actively running operations, before I decided that building wealth quietly was more valuable than building a public reputation. Then I scrolled to the proposed changes. Pending authorization. Processing deadline. December 7th, 2024. New beneficiary Coastal Holdings Group, LLC, registered Delaware Corporation. Managing member, Celine Redmond. Secondary member, Celeste Sinclair. I read it twice. Celine wasn't just Celeste's lover. Celine wasn't just her accomplice. Celine controlled the entity that would receive the payout. Marcus's note appeared in the margin. Your wife isn't even the primary. Celine Redmond controls the entity. Coastal Holdings Group, created May 15th, 2024. Same month, Daschle found that secondary account. They've been building the infrastructure for 6 months. 6 months of planning, 6 months of midnight access, 6 months of positioning Celine as the one who would actually control the money when the time came. They're not splitting my money, I said to the empty office. They're taking all of it and cutting me out completely. But the beneficiary change was just structure, just paperwork. I pulled up Marcus's background report on Gerald Carpenter and began cross-referencing dates. Case 1, high net worth beneficiary, change June 2018. Insured party, Robert Mitchell, 62, real estate developer. Beneficiary change from wife to newly created LLC. Subject deceased, November 2019, accidental fall from yacht deck during solo sail. Investigation ruled accident. Insurance paid out $85 million. Gerald Carpenter listed as insurance consultant on the beneficiary change documentation. Case 2, estate restructuring with beneficiary modification. March 2020, insured party, Thomas Reynolds, 58, investment banker. Beneficiary change from Children's Trust to Business Partners Holding Company. Subject deceased. August 2021, sudden cardiac event during routine physical examination. Investigation ruled natural causes. Insurance paid out $120 million. Gerald Carpenter listed as estate planning consultant. Accidental fall, cardiac event. The insurance company never questioned either one because the paperwork was perfect. I pulled up a calculator and did the math. June 2018 to November 2019, 17 months. March 2020 to August 2021, 17 months. Not immediately, not suspiciously fast, but within 18 months of the beneficiary change, both insured parties died in ways that could be explained away as accidents or natural causes. And now Gerald Carpenter was helping Celeste and Celine set up the same structure, same tight timeline, same carefully constructed LLC beneficiary, targeting a 60-year-old man who, according to his wife's public narrative, had health issues and emotional weaknesses. "This isn't about leaving me," I said. "They're planning to bury me." The words landed in the quiet office like stones dropped in deep water. I stood and walked to my filing cabinet, pulling out the corporate structure documents I kept locked away. Documents Celeste had stopped asking about years ago, assuming they were just archived business records from a career I'd left behind. The insurance policy was catastrophic. $100 million transferred to an entity I didn't control, paid out upon my death. But it wasn't everything. My controlling stake in the cold storage empire was worth over $500 million, currently protected by shareholder agreements and trust structures I'd established decades ago. Celeste sat on the board. She managed operations. She reported to the anonymous chairman quarterly. But she didn't control the shares. She didn't control the voting rights. She didn't control the trust that held the empire together. Unless I was declared incompetent, unless I was incapacitated, unless I was dead, then those protections could be challenged, the trust could be dissolved, the shareholder agreements could be restructured under probate law, and whoever controlled my estate, whoever was listed as beneficiary on the insurance policy that would fund the legal battles would have the resources to seize everything. Insurance, $100 million. I said, mapping it out on paper. Controlling stake, $500 million. Combined liquid assets, another $200 million. They're not planning to take a piece. They want the entire empire. The midnight account access, the forged signatures, the insurance consultant with a body count, Celine controlling the beneficiary entity, and me, supposedly weak and dependent, about to have an unfortunate accident sometime in the next 18 months. Maybe a fall, maybe a cardiac event, maybe something else entirely that could be explained away as natural causes for a 60-year-old man who'd lived a stressful life. I built a $500 million empire from nothing, and my wife thought I'd die quietly in my apron without noticing she was stealing it. But they'd made one critical mistake. They forgot I'm not actually the harmless house husband they've been calling me for 5 years. I'm the anonymous chairman who signs off on every major decision. I'm the strategist who built the corporate structures they're trying to dismantle. I'm the investigator who spent 30 years finding fraud in systems designed to hide it. And now I knew exactly what they were planning. I closed the insurance file and opened a secure messaging app I hadn't used in 3 years. Direct line to Desmond Stafford, my in-house general counsel, the man who handled the legal affairs of the cold storage empire, the man Celeste reported to quarterly without realizing she was reporting to someone who answered to me. The message was short. Need emergency meeting. Prepare TRO package and compliance review authorization. Suspected insurance fraud with potential criminal intent. Timeline critical 4 days until processing. Then I added one more line, and Desmond, don't tell anyone, not even my wife, because the only way to stop people planning your elimination is to eliminate their plan first. I pressed send and sat back in my chair looking at the evidence spread across my desk. Medical records proving a decade of deception, digital forensics showing 6 months of systematic theft, insurance documents revealing a murder-for-profit scheme. 4 days until December 7th. 4 days to build a legal case so airtight that Celeste and Celine would spend the next decade in prison instead of spending my money. The war had begun, they just didn't know it yet. The KYC compliance database flagged Celine Redmond's profile within 3 seconds of Dashiell's query, and the alert level was red, the designation reserved for high-risk financial actors with documented fraud history. Desmond had confirmed receipt of my message about the TRO package within an hour. Now, the morning of December 4th, I sat in my office on a video call with Dashiell, watching him run the screening that would either confirm my suspicions or prove I was building a case on paranoia. The screen behind him filled with data fields, risk assessment markers, cross-reference alerts. Red flag, Daschle said, his voice carrying the careful precision of someone delivering bad news professionally. High-risk designation, multiple database matches across different states and time frames. Like what kind of matches? Financial fraud databases, OSINT cross-references, court records. And here's the interesting part. The Social Security number associated with Celine Redmond was only issued 18 months ago. I sat forward. 18 months she's been working for Celeste for almost 2 years. Exactly, which means for the first 6 months she was using a different identity. The name Celine Redmond didn't exist before June 2023. It's a constructed identity. Social Security number issued to a person claiming to be 35 years old. So who is she really? Daschle's fingers moved across his keyboard. Give me 10 minutes. The screening system has cross-references to previous identities. Let me follow the alias trail. I watched him work pulling up databases I recognized from my own corporate investigations years ago. Public records, financial transaction histories, court filing systems. The digital paper trail that people think disappears when they change names, but actually just gets buried under new data. Identity is supposed to be permanent, but for some people it's just a costume they change when the last performance ends. "I'd got it," Daschle said. Celine Redmond was preceded by Sarah Pelletier. Louisiana, 2019 to 2023. Before that, Sandra Reynolds, Arizona, 2016 to 2019. Each identity lasted 2 to 4 years before being abandoned, always coinciding with residential moves and new employment. Same industry. Healthcare administration, all 3 identities. Sarah Pelletier worked in healthcare billing for a regional hospital network in Baton Rouge. Sandra Reynolds was in medical office management in Phoenix. The pattern was becoming clear. She didn't just change names randomly, she moved through the same professional space building, the same kinds of access targeting the same vulnerabilities. Criminal charges, I asked. 2 confirmed, insurance billing fraud in Arizona under the Sandra Reynolds identity, embezzlement charges in Louisiana under Sarah Pelletier. Both cases were dropped. Why, Arizona case insufficient evidence after key documents disappeared from the prosecutor's office. Louisiana case primary witness failed to appear for testimony. Failed to appear or disappeared. Daschle paused reading something on his screen. Disappeared. I'm looking at the case notes now. Witness was scheduled to testify, never showed up, never heard from again. The cold feeling in my chest spread outward. Healthcare billing. That's how she got close to Celeste. She's been running this playbook before. And there's more. Daschle pulled up another file. The Arizona case involved a life insurance claim. The beneficiary change was processed by, I'm checking the investigator's name in the court documents, Gerald Carpenter. The room went very quiet. Say that again. Gerald Carpenter, the same insurance consultant meeting with Celeste and Celine, now was involved in the Arizona fraud case that got Sandra Reynolds, Celine's previous identity, charged with insurance fraud. What was the outcome of that case? Our charges dropped. But here's what the case file shows. Elderly victim male, 62 years old, living alone. Beneficiary change processed 3 months before death. Victim fell downstairs in his home. Death ruled accidental. No witnesses. Beneficiary payout, $45 million. Sandra Reynolds was employed as the deceased's healthcare coordinator. She disappeared 6 weeks after the insurance check cleared. I felt something shift in my understanding. This wasn't opportunistic. This wasn't Celeste seducing an assistant into helping with a scheme. This was a professional criminal who had done this before, with the same consultant targeting the same demographic using the same methods. She's not Celeste's assistant, I said slowly. She's a professional. This is what she does. Identity fraud insurance scams, probably worse. Career criminal, Daschle confirmed. Based on the timeline, I estimate her real age is 38 to 40, not 35. She's been doing this for at least 8 years across 3 confirmed identities, 4 questionable insurance payouts across 3 states. And that's just what I can find in 2 hours of searching. Celeste thought she was the one in control using Celine to steal my fortune. She had no idea she was the one being used. The Arizona victim, I said. You said he fell downstairs. How exactly? It found at the bottom of his basement stairs. Head trauma. Medical examiner ruled it consistent with accidental fall. The man had been drinking that evening, blood alcohol level .08. Investigation concluded he'd lost his balance. Alone in his house. Convenient. Very. And here's the detail that should concern you. The beneficiary change had been filed exactly 14 months before his death, long enough that it didn't trigger automatic investigation. 14 months, 17 months in Carpenter's other case, 18 months in the pattern Marcus had identified. They had a timeline. They had a method. They had done this successfully at least twice before. And now they were doing it to me. Send me everything I said. Full report, all 3 identities, court records, case outcomes. I need documentation that would hold up in court. Already compiling it. You'll have it in 20 minutes. Dashiell's face filled the screen, his expression serious. Dad, there's one more thing. The Louisiana embezzlement case. The witness who was supposed to testify. The one who disappeared. Victoria Hartman, 54 years old, healthcare administrator. She was going to testify that Sarah Pelletier Celine's Louisiana identity had been systematically billing Medicare for services never rendered and pocketing the difference. Hartman discovered the fraud, reported it internally, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. And then what? She disappeared 3 weeks before the trial. Car found abandoned at a shopping mall in Mayterry. Purse and phone still inside. No signs of struggle. No body ever found. Case went cold. Without her testimony, the embezzlement charges were dismissed. I stared at my screen processing the implications. Never found, I repeated. Never found, never seen again. Louisiana State Police classified it as a missing person case. Still open, no leads. The encrypted report arrived in my inbox. I opened it and began reading 3 identities, 8 years of fraud, 4 insurance payouts, 1 missing witness. And upstairs in our bedroom, Celeste was getting ready for another day at her healthcare management office, completely unaware she'd invited a serial predator into our lives, into our marriage bed. Terrence Bentley, the 48-year-old CFO of my cold storage empire, received the audit authorization at 6 a.m., with instructions that left no room for negotiation, full compliance review of all subsidiary and affiliated entities, beginning with Sinclair Healthcare Solutions, Celeste's company. The missing witness haunted me through the night. Victoria Hartman disappeared 3 weeks before testifying against Celine's previous identity. Never found. I couldn't protect someone already dead, but I could stop Celeste from becoming the next name on that list. Terrence answered my secure call on the first ring. The healthcare company used Sinclair Capital for its 2019 expansion, I said without preamble. That triggers my audit authority under the shareholder agreement. I'm invoking it now. A pause, then Terrence's careful voice. Celeste doesn't know about that clause, does she? She never read the fine print. When I financed her expansion, the corporate structure included oversight provisions for any entity using my capital. Those provisions give me audit authority. What am I looking for? Vendor payments, especially any that cycle back through shell companies or have unusual approval patterns. Cash flow irregularities. Anything that looks like embezzlement disguised as operational expenses. You think she's stealing from her own company? I think someone is, and Terrence, keep this completely confidential. No one can know I've authorized this audit. Understood. I'll have preliminary findings within 48 hours. 36 hours later, Terrence sat across from me in the villa's conference room, laptop open, financial spreadsheets filling the screen with damning evidence. Coastal Medical Supplies. He said, highlighting the first entry, Maritime Healthcare Solutions, Beachside Consulting Group, 36 vendors that exist only on paper, no physical addresses beyond P.O. boxes in Delaware and Nevada, no employee records, no actual inventory or service delivery. Now how much? $3.2 million in the past 18 months. Payments flowing out in neat increments, $50,000 here, $100,000 there. Always just below the federal reporting thresholds that would trigger automatic investigation. Corporate fraud is just embezzlement in a suit and tie. The only difference is the paperwork looks professional while it's stealing your life. Where's the money going after the initial payment you styles? Terrence pulled up a flowchart he'd created tracing the money through layers of corporate shell games. That's the interesting part. The payments leave Sinclair Healthcare Solutions to these fake vendors. Then the money cycles through 3 intermediary accounts, different banks, different jurisdictions. Gets cleaned, gets consolidated, and ends up in... You need to see this for yourself. He turned the laptop toward me. The final destination was an offshore holding structure registered in the Cayman Islands. The entity name made my chest tighten: Coastal Holdings Group. The same LLC listed as beneficiary on my life insurance policy. They're not just stealing from the healthcare company, I said slowly. They're building a financial war chest. When the insurance money comes through, it'll flow into an entity that already has over $3 million of stolen funds. And there's more. Terrence spread transaction records across the conference table, each page marked with highlighter. Half of these fraudulent vendor payments bear electronic approval signatures, in your name. I went very still. Show me. He pulled up the authorization documents, payment approvals for fake vendors, each one stamped with the electronic signature protocol that supposedly verified my identity. Same authentication pattern, same device metadata. Documents I'd never seen. Authorizations I'd never given. All carefully backdated to make me appear complicit in a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that had been running for over a year. If the federal government investigates this, I said, my voice deadly calm, who looks like the criminal? Terrence met my eyes. You, the controlling shareholder who financed the company and apparently approved millions in fraudulent payments. Celeste walks away clean because you're the signature on file. You're the one with access. You're the one who would go to prison. My signature, on documents I never saw, approving theft I never authorized. They weren't just stealing my money, they were making me the criminal. The insurance scheme makes sense now, I said. They need me dead or in prison. Either way, I'm eliminated, and Celeste inherits the empire without the complications of a messy divorce or a fraud investigation that might expose her role. What do you want me to do? Document everything. I need timestamps, authentication logs, device metadata. Proof that these signatures are forged, and I need it by tomorrow. You're going to fight this. I'm going to bury them with it. Terrence began gathering the documents. Lawrence, if this hits federal investigators before you can explain, yet how long until I'm arrested? His silence was answer enough. I pulled out my phone and opened the message thread with Desmond Stafford. My fingers moved quickly across the screen. TRO package needs expansion. Add emergency request for AML. Hold on all accounts connected to Sinclair Healthcare Solutions. We have 3 days before the insurance authorization processes. If they get that $100 million before we freeze the fraud, they'll disappear and leave me holding a federal indictment. Desmond's reply came back within minutes. Understood. Preparing emergency filing for tomorrow morning. Will include fraud evidence as supporting documentation for TRO and AML compliance hold. Bank will freeze accounts pending investigation. I looked at the calendar on my phone. December 5th. The insurance beneficiary change would process on December 7th in 3 days. 3 days to stop a murder-for-profit scheme. 3 days to prove I was being framed for fraud. 3 days to protect myself, my empire, and possibly even Celeste from a serial predator who had done this before and would do it again. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Palm Beach coastline. Somewhere in this city, Celeste and Celine were congratulating themselves on how smoothly their plan was progressing. How the harmless house husband suspected nothing, how 3 more days would put everything in place. They thought they were almost finished. They had no idea I'd been building a case file that would send them to prison for the next 20 years. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. Desmond Stafford arrived at the villa within an hour, his briefcase containing the kind of legal documents usually reserved for corporate espionage cases and federal criminal defense. 3 days until December the 7th. 3 days until the insurance authorization processed and I either stopped a murder-for-profit scheme or became its victim. But first, I had to survive being framed for the fraud that was funding it. Desmond spread documents across the conference room table, while Terrence pulled up financial records on the wall-mounted screen. The fraud structure revealed itself in clinical detail, elegant in its cruelty. If you walk into the FBI right now and claim fraud, Desmond said, his 52 years as a corporate attorney, evident in the careful precision of his words, they'll arrest you on the spot. Your signatures are on everything. The authentication logs show your credentials. The shell companies trace back to accounts in your name. I stared at the evidence that would condemn me. My electronic signature on vendor approvals I'd never seen. My authentication device authorizing payments I'd never made. Corporate registration documents listing me as beneficial owner of entities I'd never heard of until yesterday. But I can prove the signatures are forged," I said. Daschle found the device spoofing evidence. Technical evidence takes months to validate in court. Forged signatures look real on first review. You'd be indicted before you could prove innocence. The trap was perfect. If I reported the fraud, I became the criminal. If I stayed silent, they stole everything. Either way, Celeste and Celine walked away while I burned. Terrence pulled up another screen showing the money flow. The shell companies Coastal Medical Supplies, Maritime Healthcare Solutions, Beachside Consulting, they're all registered using your personal information. Social security number, date of birth, residential address. On paper, you created them. That's how identity theft. But proving it requires demonstrating you had no access to the systems used for registration. That takes time we don't have. Daschle joined via secure video conference, his face appearing on the screen behind us. "I've been building the counter-evidence," he said. "For every forged signature, I'm documenting your actual location with time-stamped proof. Security footage, credit card transactions, witness statements." He pulled up a spreadsheet that mapped my real movements against the fraudulent authorizations. November 15th authorization. He said, highlighting one entry. "Logged at 2:17 a.m. from a device you don't own, but your credit card shows you were at a 24-hour diner in Miami at that exact time. Receipt security footage server, who remembers you. Physical impossibility for you to be in two places at once." Terrence added another layer. "The shell company registrations list you as owner, but the incorporation documents were filed electronically using an IP address in Boca Raton, 50 miles from the villa. Wi-Fi network you've never accessed. Innocence without evidence is just a nice story. Evidence without timing is suicide. Justice requires both and patience. We're building proof that someone impersonated you systematically," Desmond said. "But we need everything documented before we move. One gap in the timeline and the prosecution argues you're fabricating an alibi." "That's how long?" 48 hours to compile everything airtight. Maybe less if Daschle can accelerate the digital forensics. "We have less than 48 hours. December 7th is in 2 days. Desmond and I locked eyes across the conference table. "Then we work through the night," he said. "For the next 4 hours, we built a federal prosecution package, except the target was the real criminals, not the scapegoat. For every forged signature, we documented my alibi. For every fraudulent authorizations Daschle provided, device logs proving the access came from hardware I didn't own. For every shell company, we traced the IP addresses to locations I'd never visited. By midnight, the evidence package was 80% complete. And that's when I had to make the hardest decision. If I report this tomorrow," I said, looking at Desmond, "what happens?" He didn't hesitate. "Federal investigation opens within 48 hours. Your signatures flag you as primary suspect. You're arrested, possibly indicted, while they investigate whether the forgeries are real. Celeste and Celine have time to disappear or destroy evidence. You fight from jail. And if I stay silent, finish the evidence package, and wait for them to make their next move, we control the narrative. We prove your innocence before anyone files charges. And when they try to execute the final piece of their plan, the insurance payout on December 7th, we have enough documented evidence to bring criminal charges against them instead." Every instinct screamed to call the FBI to confront Celeste, to expose everything. But I'd spent 40 years building a business empire. I knew the difference between winning and feeling righteous. "We stay silent," I said. "Finish the evidence package, maintain the facade. And when they make their move, we destroy them with documentation so airtight they can't breathe." Daschle nodded from the screen. "I'll have the digital forensics completed by tomorrow afternoon." Terrence began gathering financial records. "I'll document every fraudulent transaction with corresponding proof of your actual location." Desmond closed his briefcase. "I'll prepare the criminal referral package. When we're ready to move, we go directly to federal prosecutors with everything. They'll see immediately who the real criminals are." At 1 a.m., I walked Desmond to the door. He carried 3 encrypted drives containing copies of everything: insurance fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, forged signatures, the complete criminal conspiracy. "How long do we have?" I asked. Desmond checked his watch. "December 7th is in 2 days. They need your signature on something to finalize the insurance transfer, which means Celeste is going to start pushing paperwork very soon." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Message from Celeste. "Can we talk tomorrow? Some financial documents need your signature. Nothing urgent, just routine. I showed Desmond the screen. His expression said everything the endgame had begun. Don't sign anything, he said. Not until we know exactly what it is. One signature on the wrong document and they have everything they need. And if I refuse, then they know you're onto them. They'll either accelerate their timeline or cut their losses and run. So I have to appear willing without actually signing. Exactly. Play the oblivious husband one more time. Stall, ask questions, buy us the time to finish building the case. I looked at Celeste's message again. Nothing urgent, just routine. The same word she'd used to dismiss me for 32 years. But this time, I knew exactly what routine meant. It meant the authorization that would make me worth more dead than alive. It meant the signature that would finalize my elimination. It meant tomorrow morning I'd have to sit across from my wife and pretend I didn't know she was planning my murder. I was rinsing breakfast dishes when Celeste appeared in the kitchen doorway, her arms cradling 3 manila folders like precious cargo. 2 days had become one. December 6th, 24 hours until the deadline. 24 hours to maintain the facade while Desmond and Dashiell finished building the evidence package that would save me from prison or prove insufficient to stop my arrest. Lawrence, darling. Celeste said, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes sharp as broken glass. We have some family paperwork that needs your signature. The water continued running over my hands, but I'd stopped moving. After everything Desmond had shown me, the forged documents, the conspiracy timeline, the theft in motion, this moment felt inevitable. She crossed the kitchen and set the folders on the granite island between us, her manicured fingers arranging them just so. It's nothing complicated. She continued sliding the top folder toward me. Just routine estate planning updates. You trust me to handle these things, don't you? Oh, verband, onsterudauigst. The question hung in the air like a trap waiting to spring. I dried my hands, slowly buying seconds to compose my face into the expression she expected, mildly confused, eager to please, never questioning. Estate planning, I said. I thought we updated everything last year. Minor adjustments. She opened the first folder, revealing documents that looked professionally prepared, perfectly legitimate. Beneficiary confirmations, trust structure updates, nothing that affects our daily lives. She'd brought an expensive pen Mont Blanc, the kind she used for important signatures, placed my coffee beside the folders, created the perfect signing environment. I could see the insurance authorization buried in the second folder, camouflaged between what appeared to be standard trust amendments. Should I read through everything? I asked, reaching for my reading glasses with hands that I let tremble slightly. Playing the role, the aging house husband who needed guidance. Of course, if you want to. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Though it's quite technical, legal language. You know how these attorneys write nobody can understand it without a law degree. I picked up the first document, scanning lines of dense text. That's when she touched my hand. The gesture was gentle, affectionate, her fingers warm against mine. And suddenly, I was 15 years ago, standing in this same kitchen after my father's funeral. Celeste touching my hand exactly like this, her voice carrying the same manufactured warmth as she'd convinced me to sign power of attorney documents. The smell of jasmine from her perfume, the temperature of her fingers, the precise cadence of her voice saying, "I'll handle everything, darling. You just need to sign." The memory hit with visceral clarity, and I understood this wasn't new behavior. This was a pattern I'd been too trusting to see. I pulled my hand back, making it look like I needed to turn the page. "Take your time," Celeste said, but her tone had shifted slightly, impatience bleeding through the sweetness. I read slowly, deliberately, each paragraph taking longer than necessary. "Lawrence," her voice carried a new edge. "We've been married 32 years. I've always handled the complicated financial matters to protect you from stress. This is about securing our family's future. Dashiell's inheritance. Guilt, the first manipulation tactic deployed." "I know," I said, still reading. "I just want to make sure I understand what I'm signing." "Are you feeling all right lately?" she asked, and now concern coated the words like honey over poison. "You seem more anxious than usual. Maybe we should have Dr. Morrison check if your medication needs adjusting." Shame, suggesting my caution indicated mental decline. "I'm fine," I said, just being thorough. "Thorough is good, but paranoid isn't healthy." She leaned closer. "You're not having one of your episodes, are you? Where you start imagining things that aren't real. Gaslighting, making me doubt my own perceptions." I set down the first document and reached for the second folder, the one containing the insurance authorization. "Actually," I said, letting confusion color my voice. Maybe I should have Desmond look at these first, just to be safe. Celeste's expression froze for a half second, before the smile returned. Desmond, our attorney, for routine estate planning, Davour. You said it was technical. He could explain it better than I could understand it. Lawrence. Now frustration bled through completely. Celine spent hours organizing these documents as a favor to us. It would be embarrassing to tell her we're not signing after all her work. Manipulation through social obligation. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and felt something inside me shift and die. What I'd thought was residual love, what I'd mistaken for nostalgia, simply evaporated. The woman before me wasn't the partner I'd married 32 years ago. She was a stranger wearing a familiar face. Every sweet word was calculated violence. Every gesture was performance. This wasn't betrayal I was witnessing. It was the unveiling of what had always been there. And the clarity rather than anger became my armor. She sees a man who spent decades managing the household while she built her career. She sees someone who's never questioned her financial authority, who's soft-spoken and compliant, whose hands shake slightly as he reaches for his reading glasses. She sees someone she's completely underestimated, someone she believes she's already beaten. But she's wrong. These need to be filed by tomorrow, Celeste said, then caught herself. Her eyes widened slightly. Tomorrow? I asked, injecting innocent confusion into my tone. Why is there a deadline for estate planning documents? She scrambled. Tax year filing requirements. End of fiscal quarter. You know how these things work. I didn't point out that estate planning had nothing to do with quarterly tax filings. Let me think about it, I said instead. Maybe after lunch. My hands are cramping from the gardening yesterday. Celeste's jaw tightened, the mask slipping further. Of course, she said, gathering the folders with barely concealed frustration. We'll revisit this afternoon. She left the kitchen heels clicking against tile, the unsigned documents clutched against her chest, like ammunition she'd failed to use. I'd bought one more day, but I knew with absolute certainty now December 7th was her deadline, and she was more desperate than she'd been letting on. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone buzzed. Message from Terrence Bentley. Urgent. Electronic signature authorization processed through accounting this morning. Your credentials, not your approval. They've already submitted it. December 7th filing confirmed. Call me now. My hands froze over the cutting board knife suspended midair. Behind me, I heard Celeste's footsteps descending the stairs. Darling, her voice called out bright with false cheer. No need to worry about those papers anymore. I took care of everything for us. I turned off my phone screen before Celeste could see the message, the knife still trembling in my grip. She entered the kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd already won, heels clicking against tile, smile bright with false warmth. And darling, no need to worry about those papers anymore, she said, pouring wine. I took care of everything for us. I set down the knife, carefully turning to face her with mild confusion and gratitude. You took care of it. You look so stressed this morning. I signed them for you, saved you the trouble. She sipped her wine, watching me. Sometimes a wife just has to step in and handle things. You signed for me. How does that even work? Electronic signatures, sweetheart. It's all digital now, so much simpler. Her tone suggested I was adorably out of touch. I have access to your authentication credentials for emergencies. Estate planning, financial authorizations, all handled with a few clicks. She wasn't even hiding the forgery. She believed her access was legitimate and untraceable. I managed a smile that felt like breaking glass. That's very thoughtful. I knew you'd understand. She patted my shoulder like reassuring a confused child. Finish dinner. I have calls to make. She left, and I counted to 30 before moving. In my office, I locked the door and called Terrence back. Tell me everything. Electronic signature processed at 9:47 this morning. Used your credentials, your device metadata, your IP address. To anyone reviewing it, you personally approved the transaction. But I was at the villa all morning. I know, which means they either cloned your device perfectly or... He paused. How many times have you unlocked your office safe in Celeste's presence? How many times had I unlocked my office safe in her presence, trusting her enough to let the combination stay visible? Dozens? Maybe hundreds over 32 years. They have physical access to everything that I said. Not just access, control. Dashiell needs to see this immediately. I called my son on the secure video line. His face appeared already focused. The signature metadata shows your device, your timestamp, your IP address. But you didn't sign it, Dashel said, pulling up technical data. Can you prove that? I'm trying. The authentication logs show access from hardware matching your registered device serial numbers. They didn't just forge a signature, they cloned your entire digital identity. Terrence's voice came through my phone. This is worse than standard fraud. They've created a perfect technical replica of you. And how long do we have before this becomes irreversible? Before I reveal exactly how much time Lawrence has left to stop this, are you still here? Comment A, if he can still win, or B, if he's already lost. Add your reason in 5 to 10 words. Please note what follows includes recreated details for narrative purposes. My phone rang. Teresa Henderson's name appeared. I answered on speaker so Dashel could hear. Mr. Sinclair, this is Teresa Henderson from First Palm Trust. I'm calling with required notification regarding your policy authorization. Go ahead. The beneficiary change authorization you submitted this morning has entered final verification. I'm required to inform you that final verbal authorization is scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow, December 7th. The weight of those 12 hours settled on my chest like concrete, every minute now audible, countable, final. Verbal authorization, for what amount? Or the full policy transfer, sir. $100 million, the beneficiary confirmation call. And this call is scheduled for 10 a.m. Yes, sir. You confirmed attendance when the authorization was filed this morning. The call will verify your identity, confirm your intent, and finalize the transfer. Standard protocol for high-value policy changes. Who will be on the call? Yourself, the designated beneficiary representative, and our senior verification officer. The call typically takes 15 to 20 minutes. I looked at Dashel's face on the screen. He was already typing. And if I don't attend, the authorization would be flagged for review, which could delay processing by 30 to 60 days. However, given that you've confirmed attendance, we're expecting your participation. I see, thank you. We'll see you on the call tomorrow morning. The line went dead. Dashel's expression was grim. They've thought of everything. If you don't show up, it delays, but doesn't stop the process. And someone claiming to be you already confirmed attendance. Which means they're planning to either coerce me into making that call or make it for you, Terrence finished. Voice synthesis technology could fake your voice with enough recorded samples. We have less than 12 hours. The office door creaked open behind me. I spun to see Celeste in the doorway, backlit by hallway light, her smile sharp in the dim office. It's still working so late, darling, she said, honey sweet. You'll need your rest? We both have an important phone call to make in the morning. She knew. She knew about the verification call. She knew about the 10 a.m. deadline. She knew I'd received the notification. And she was here to make sure I understood exactly what would happen if I didn't cooperate. Just finishing some emails, I said, closing my laptop to hide Dashel's face. I'll be up soon. Don't be too long. Her smile never wavered. Tomorrow's a big day for both of us, for our whole family, really. The beginning of a new chapter. She closed the door, footsteps retreating. I reopened the laptop. Dashel was still there, his expression matching my cold fury. She's going to try to force you to make that call, he said. I know. What are you going to do? I looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Less than 11 hours until the verification call that would transfer everything I'd built to the woman who'd spent a decade planning my elimination. I'm going to sleep in my office tonight, I said, with the door locked. And tomorrow morning, we're going to find out exactly how desperate she really is. I waited until Celeste's breathing steadied into sleep before I slipped from our bedroom and texted the emergency code, Red Dawn. She'd invited me to bed with honey-sweet reassurance about tomorrow's call, explaining how simple it would be, how quickly we could finalize everything together. I'd nodded, played exhausted, let her believe I was accepting the inevitable. Now at 1:47 a.m., I descended the back stairs to the villa's in-house legal office where Desmond and Terrence were already waiting, laptops open, coffee brewing. Desmond looked up, his 71 years showing in the lines around his eyes. How long do we have? Less than 8 hours until the verification call, I said, locking the door behind me. They've scheduled it for 10 a.m. Someone will impersonate me or coerce me into authorizing the transfer. Terrence pulled up a timeline on his screen. Then we shift from investigation to active defense. Now. Agreed, Desmond said, opening a new document. Then we file for an emergency TRO before the banks open at 9 a.m. And I trigger the AML compliance hold, Terrence added. Once anti-money laundering flags, the bank freezes everything automatically. I sat down at the conference table, the weight of 32 years of marriage pressing against 8 hours of strategic precision. Walk me through it. Desmond's fingers flew across his keyboard. Emergency temporary restraining order. We document the fraud pattern, the forged signatures, the cloned digital identity, the unauthorized policy transfer. Present it to a judge as identity theft in progress. The TRO freezes all accounts pending investigation, Terrence continued. But we need a judge's signature before 9 a.m. And the AML report, I asked. Goes directly to federal compliance, Terrence said. Once filed, the bank has no choice but to freeze. Anti-money laundering protocols override everything, even legitimate-looking authorizations. For the next 2 hours, we built our counter-trap with surgical precision. Desmond drafted the TRO application, citing specific fraud indicators. The electronic signature processed while I was provably elsewhere. The metadata inconsistencies Daschle had documented the suspicious beneficiary change timing. Terrence compiled financial forensics access logs, authentication records, the complete audit trail of unauthorized activity. Every forged signature, every cloned credential, every piece of evidence that someone had created a perfect digital replica of me. At 4:17 a.m., Terrence discovered something else. "And Lawrence, there's a second mechanism," he said, pulling up corporate filings. "Celeste has filed paperwork to access your voting shares in Sinclair Industries." I went cold. My chairman position. "She doesn't know you're the anonymous chairman," Desmond said slowly. "But she knows you hold significant voting shares through the family trust. If she gains control, she doesn't just get the money," I finished. "She gets operational control of the company itself." We were building a legal fortress in the dark, racing against a sunrise that would either reveal our ramparts or our graves. Terrence added the corporate seizure attempt to the AML report. Desmond incorporated it into the TRO application as evidence of systematic asset theft. The picture was becoming clear. This wasn't just insurance fraud. This was a complete hostile takeover of my entire financial identity. "What's the flaw?" I asked, watching them work. "There's always a flaw." Desmond looked up from his laptop. "You'll need to be at the courthouse when it opens at 8:30 a.m. for emergency filing. TROs require in-person appearance before a judge. And the AML report needs your live signature," Terrence added. "As the victim making the fraud claim under penalty of perjury, digital signature won't work. They'd argue it could be forged like everything else." The logistics crystallized into an impossible equation. Leave the villa before Celeste Wake's file at the courthouse by 8:30, trigger the AML freeze, stop the 10 a.m. verification call. "And if Celeste discovers I'm gone before the 10 a.m. call?" I asked. "Then she moves up the timeline," Terrence said quietly, "and we lose everything." By 5:30 a.m., we had both documents ready. The TRO application was 47 pages of evidence, witness statements, and forensic analysis. The AML report was a devastating portrait of identity theft and financial fraud, flagged for immediate federal review. Desmond printed 3 copies of each, organized them into leather portfolios with tab dividers and exhibits. Terrence loaded backup files onto encrypted drives. "The courthouse opens at 8:30, Desmond said. "Emergency filings go to Judge Patricia Crane. She handles pre-bank opening injunctions." "How long will the hearing take?" I asked. 20 minutes if she's convinced, 2 hours if she's skeptical." I checked my phone. 5:42 a.m. Celeste's alarm was set for 7 a.m. She'd mentioned wanting to help me prepare for our important call, making sure I was rested and ready and fully cooperative. How do you escape a prison when the warden sleeps in your bed and holds the only key? You leave before she wakes. You move in silence. You take nothing she can trace. "I'll leave at 6:45, I said. "Tell her I went for an early drive to clear my head before the call. Buy myself 90 minutes. "Will she believe that?" Terrence asked. "She'll have to," I said. "She needs me functional and cooperative for the 10 a.m. call. Pushing too hard risks making me genuinely unstable." Desmond was sealing the final documents into portfolios when we heard it. Footsteps on the stairs above us. Light certain descending. I checked my phone. 5:47 a.m. Celeste's voice called down, bright and alert, cutting through the early morning silence like a blade through silk. "That's Lawrence. Are you making coffee, darling? I couldn't sleep either, so excited about our big day. I handed Celeste her coffee with a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth and lied about insomnia. Couldn't sleep, I said, gesturing to Desmond and Terrence, who'd positioned themselves to look like they'd just arrived. Called the team to go over some estate planning details. Thought I'd handle the boring parts before our important call. She accepted the coffee, studying my face with the careful attention of someone inventorying their assets. You should rest, darling. Big day ahead. I will, I promised, watching her retreat upstairs with the satisfied smile of someone who believed she had already won. The moment her bedroom door closed, Dashiell emerged from the service hallway, carrying 2 equipment cases. We have 90 minutes, I said. Maybe less. Then we moved fast. We installed the first camera in the study at 6:34 a.m., a lens no larger than a shirt button positioned in the bookshelf with a clear view of the desk where Celeste kept her laptop. Dashiell's fingers worked with surgeon precision, routing cables through existing HVAC vents, hiding receiver units behind air returns. Camera in the study, audio in the living room, keystroke logger on her laptop. Dashiell whispered, moving to the next location. Everything admissible if we do this right. How long until she realizes? I asked, holding the ladder steady while he installed a microphone disguised as a smoke detector. If we're lucky, never. If we're not, it won't matter, because we'll already have what we need. We moved through the villa like surgical ghosts. Audio in the dining room, camera covering the main entrance, digital timestamp logger synced to the cellular network, creating an unalterable record of every captured moment. At 7:23 a.m., while positioning a camera in the living room, Dashiell pulled up Celeste's text messages on his tablet. The keystroke logger was already feeding him data. He went still. What me, I asked. He turned the screen toward me. A message thread between Celeste and Celine, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. the previous night. Celeste, be here at 9:45. We need you present during the call. Celine, witness coverage. Das. Celeste, exactly. Makes the authorization look consensual and willing. Lawrence surrounded by family, celebrating our anniversary, making sound financial decisions together. They'd planned it perfectly, or thought they had. A witness present to testify that I'd appeared competent, willing, fully aware of what I was authorizing. They're documenting their own fraud, Dashiell said quietly. They just don't know we're documenting it. By 8 a.m., we had 7 cameras, operational 11 audio feeds, and complete digital surveillance of Celeste's devices. Every room where the conspiracy might unfold was now a recorded stage. I found Celeste in our bedroom, already dressed in an elegant cream dress, applying makeup with the careful precision of someone preparing for an important performance. I've been thinking, I said, using the soft tone of a man seeking forgiveness. I know I've been difficult lately. I want to make today special. Our anniversary deserves celebrating. She turned, surprise flickering across her face before smoothing into pleased satisfaction. What did you have in mind? An intimate gathering, here at the villa, just the important people in our lives. I moved closer, playing the devoted husband with 32 years of practice. After we handle that business call this morning, we can enjoy the day together, small, intimate. You've never had to smile at someone while imagining their arrest, have you? It requires a particular kind of control, keeping your face warm while your thoughts run cold, maintaining eye contact while planning their downfall. What a wonderful idea, darling, Celeste said, her relief visible. After we handle that quick business call this morning, we can enjoy the day together. Exactly, I said. Make it memorable. She embraced me, and I felt her body relax against mine, the tension of anticipated resistance dissolving into satisfied certainty. She believed I was capitulating, accepting, preparing to cooperate. I'll have Celine bring champagne, she said, already reaching for her phone. We should make this memorable. Already is, my dear, I said, watching her type the invitation. Already is. She never noticed Dashiell's tablet in my pocket, silently recording her keystrokes, capturing every word she sent to her co-conspirator. At 8:43 a.m., while Celeste made calls arranging catering and flowers, Dashiell appeared beside me in the hallway. Ah, cameras are live, he whispered. Every word, every move, we've got them. And the backup feeds, uploading to 3 separate cloud servers in real time. If they discover the equipment, destroy it, burn down the villa, the evidence is already preserved and time-stamped. I returned to the living room where Celeste was arranging flowers, humming softly, radiating the confidence of someone who'd planned everything perfectly. The clock read 8:47, 1 hour 13 minutes until the call that would determine whether I kept everything or lost it all. Then I understood the true brilliance of the party gambit. By inviting witnesses myself, by appearing eager and celebratory, by surrounding myself with people I'd personally asked to attend, I was creating legal documentation of my mental competency and free will. Any attempt to coerce me during the call would be immediately provable as fraud. The contrast between my willing, competent behavior before the call and any signs of pressure during it would be stark, undeniable. Celeste had planned to use witnesses to prove my consent. I'd turned her own strategy into proof of her coercion. The next hour passed in carefully choreographed domesticity. I helped Celeste arrange the living room. I sampled champagne. I played the devoted husband with such conviction that I almost believed it myself. At 9:52 a.m., 8 minutes before the verification call, the doorbell rang. Through the newly installed camera feed displayed on Dashiell's tablet, I watched Celine Redmond enter carrying champagne and file folders, the champagne for show, the folders for the real business. Behind her, a man I'd never seen before stepped into my home. He was carrying what looked unmistakably like notary certification equipment. The champagne was French, the guests were wealthy, and my wife was destroying me one smile at a time. The notary had certified nothing. The verification call had never happened. At 9:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the scheduled transfer authorization, Teresa Henderson had phoned with unexpected news the policy had been flagged for regulatory review, all changes frozen pending investigation. Celeste's face had gone white, then carefully blank. Now, 12 hours later, she was performing damage control through celebration. 50 guests filled our Villa Terrace Palm Beach Elite Business Associates Society friends. String quartet playing Vivaldi, catered hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. The anniversary party I'd proposed transformed by Celeste into a theatrical declaration of normalcy. 32 years with this wonderful man. Celeste announced, her arm around my waist, smile radiant. I'm the luckiest woman alive. A woman in diamonds. Gloria, something tech sector money, raised her glass. You two are relationship goals. How do you make it work? Says Grarsons. Simple. Celeste set her fingers tightening on my arm just slightly. I handle the complex business matters, and Lawrence makes everything else perfect. A true partnership. The guests murmured approval. I smiled like a man who had heard this compliment 1,000 times and never tired of it. From across the terrace, I caught Desmond Stafford's eye. My lawyer of 43 years stood near the fountain dressed in casual elegance, holding champagne, like any other family friend, enjoying an anniversary celebration. No one knew he was documenting every word, every gesture, every self-incriminating statement Celeste made about managing my affairs without authorization. In the study, Dashiell monitored surveillance feeds recording Celeste's performance in 4-camera high definition with synchronized audio. She was confessing to fraud and calling it love. Lawrence is so wonderfully uncomplicated. Celeste continued addressing a small cluster of admirers. While I'm negotiating 8-figure deals, he's perfecting his marinara sauce. It's charming, really. Solene appeared at her elbow, wine-flushed and confident. It's a gift having a partner who knows their strengths. Not everyone has the courage to embrace the domestic sphere. Exactly, Celeste agreed. Lawrence tried to understand one of my merger documents once. Poor dear got so overwhelmed I had to make him chamomile tea. Laughter rippled through the group, warm, indulgent, slightly pitying. It's wonderful how you protect him from all that stress. Celine said, her tone suggesting childcare rather than partnership. I maintained my tight smile. She's always been the financial mind in our family. The only financial mind, Celeste corrected, gently patting my chest. But that's what makes us work. I handle everything complicated, and Lawrence makes our home beautiful. More champagne appeared. The string quartet shifted to something celebratory. Celeste's confidence grew with each glass, each admiring comment, each successful navigation away from this morning's failed authorization. She believed she was recovering, rebuilding her image, demonstrating her loving care of an intellectually limited but devoted husband. She didn't realize she was building my case. How many ways can you watch your own murder and keep smiling? 90 minutes into the party, emboldened by wine and Celine's encouragement, Celeste gathered the guests for a toast. I want to say something about my husband. She began, and the terrace quieted 50 faces turning toward us with champagne-warm attention. I stood beside her, the devoted house husband, knowing Dashiell was adjusting camera angles to capture her face in perfect clarity. Lawrence is the reason our marriage works, Celeste said, her voice carrying across the terrace with practiced projection. He understands his limitations and trusts me completely with the complex matters. Just yesterday, I had to sign some important insurance documents for him because reading legal paperwork makes him anxious. The guests made sympathetic sounds. Poor Lawrence. How fortunate to have such a capable wife. Could you imagine him in a boardroom? Celeste continued, building to her crescendo. I'd have to translate everything to Lawrence, the man who keeps our home running while I keep our empire growing. Glasses raised. Warm applause. I raised my own glass, noting how Desmond had positioned himself to hear every word. How 3 separate cameras were capturing this moment, how Celeste had just stated on camera that she'd signed documents for me without authorization because I was incapable of understanding them. The breaking point arrived not with thunder, but with laughter. 50 people applauding my supposed incompetence while cameras recorded my wife's confession. "Careful, darling," I said very quietly. "Your empire might have some structural issues you haven't noticed." Celeste's dismissive laugh was perfectly calibrated for her audience. "See, he doesn't even understand metaphors. Adorable." More laughter, warmer now. They loved the powerful woman, and her simple husband domestic bliss with clear hierarchies. Soline raised her glass higher. To Celeste for having the strength to handle everything, while keeping Lawrence protected and happy. To Celeste, the crowd echoed. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw the moment she registered something wrong in my expression. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, quickly masked. But she'd seen it. The smile that didn't reach my eyes, the stillness that wasn't submission, the realization that I'd been performing too. As the guests applauded Celeste's toast, I set down my champagne glass with deliberate precision and looked directly at my wife. "Darling," I said, my voice cutting through the laughter with quiet steel, "I think it's time we showed our guests what empire you've actually been building." The terrace went silent. 50 faces turned toward me, some confused, some curious. All suddenly attentive to the shift in atmosphere, the way Celeste's smile had frozen into something brittle. "Lawrence," she said softly, warning in her tone. "No more chamomile tea," I said. "No more protection from complex matters. I think our friends deserve the truth about which one of us has been building empires and which one has been stealing them." Celeste's smile never wavered, which told me everything I needed to know. She'd been expecting this moment. "You're absolutely right, darling," she said, her voice warm, with what sounded like genuine delight. "Let's show them. Let's show everyone how our partnership really works." She turned to the guests with practiced grace, transforming my challenge into invitation. "Yes, Lawrence has decided to take a more active role in our financial affairs," she announced, as if I'd just suggested redecorating the living room. "Isn't that wonderful after all these years? He's ready to truly understand the empire we've built together." Applause rippled through the terrace. Warm, encouraging, completely misreading the temperature in the room. Celeste gestured to Soline, who moved forward with the fluid certainty of choreographed performance. From her elegant handbag too large for a simple party, I realized now she produced a leather portfolio. "The authorization we discussed," Soline said, smoothly opening the portfolio to reveal a document. "Just needs your signature to finalize everything." I recognized the letterhead immediately. First Palm Trust. But this wasn't the same document from the verification call that never happened. The formatting was different, the signature blocks rearranged. They'd modified it, simplified it, made it look less threatening, more routine, which meant Celeste had been carrying backup authorization papers to the party all along. This wasn't damage control. This was the plan. The verification call had been attempt 1. This public signing surrounded by witnesses who'd watched me be humiliated all evening, who'd seen me accept my place as the simple house husband. This was attempt 2. Just estate planning documents. Celeste explained to the guests, her tone suggesting boring but necessary adult responsibilities. "Beneficiary adjustments we should have handled years ago. I've been managing everything alone for so long, it's time Lawrence took ownership too." A guest nearby, the tech sector woman in diamonds, whispered to her companion, "What a beautiful moment of trust." Soline cleared a space on the nearest table, centering the document like a wedding contract. Someone produced an expensive fountain pen, the kind that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Celeste presented it to me with ceremony, her eyes meeting mine with absolute confidence. "Just a signature, darling," she said softly. "Then we can enjoy the rest of our anniversary." The guests gathered closer, forming a semicircle around us. The string quartet had stopped playing. 50 wealthy faces watched with champagne-warm interest, witnessing what they believed was a touching moment of marital partnership. 50 people holding their breath makes no sound at all. I took the pen. The weight of it felt substantial, real. I positioned it over the signature line at the bottom of the page, my hand steady. Everyone leaned forward slightly, that unconscious movement of people watching something important happen, wanting to be close enough to say they'd seen it. "Oh, just a signature," I said, quietly, looking at the blank line waiting for my name. "That's all this is." "That's all," Celeste confirmed, her voice honey smooth. I held the pen there, point touching paper, but not pressing, not moving. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. A champagne glass clinked against a table. "Before I sign anything," I said, looking up at Celeste with perfect calm, "I want to hear the truth." Her smile tightened fractionally. "I just explained—" "No," I interrupted gently. "Tell these people what you're really asking me to authorize." "Estate planning," she repeated, strain creeping into her voice now. "Beneficiary adjustments, standard financial instruments." "Tell them," I said louder now, clear enough for everyone to hear, "what happens to the life insurance policy when I sign this." The atmosphere shifted. Guests exchanged glances. The word insurance carried different weight than estate planning. "It's all part of the same portfolio," Celeste said, recovering smoothly. "Everything interconnected, darling. You know how these things work." "I do," I agreed, "which is why I want you to tell everyone here in specific terms what this document authorizes." Solene moved closer to Celeste, her body language protective. The pen felt like a loaded gun, deadly only if I pulled the trigger. She'd been aiming at my own head. "The document," Celeste said carefully, "transfers certain beneficiary designations to more appropriate parties. Standard estate planning to ensure assets are properly allocated in the event of Yastrend, Yaribom. In the event of my death, I finished. Yes, now tell them how much." Her pause lasted 3 seconds too long. "Celeste," I prompted, my voice still calm, still reasonable. "Tell our friends what happens to the policy when I sign this. The dollar amount, specific numbers." "There's various instruments," she began, but I could see her calculating, trying to find the path that didn't require saying it out loud, not here, not in front of 50 witnesses. "No," I said, setting the pen down with deliberate precision. "Tell them what happens to the $100 million life insurance policy when I sign this document." The terrace erupted in confused murmurs. $100 million. The words hung in the warm evening air like smoke from a fired weapon. Guests who had been smiling moments ago now looked uncertain, confused, starting to realize they weren't witnessing a touching moment of partnership, but something else entirely. Something darker. Celeste's face went rigid, the perfect hostess mask cracking down the middle like fine porcelain under pressure. "Lawrence," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Just transparency, darling," I said, echoing her earlier tone. "You said we should show them how our partnership works." Solene stepped forward, her voice cutting clear through the confused murmurs. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Mrs. Sinclair," she said, her eyes fixed on me with undisguised threat. "Before Lawrence says something he'll regret." I set the pen down deliberately and said the words that would end my marriage in front of 50 witnesses. "And no, Celine, we'll discuss it right here." Celeste's face went through several calculations in the space of a heartbeat. I could see her weighing options: retreat, with dignity escalate the confrontation, or destroy me so completely that no one would believe anything I said. She chose annihilation. "Fine," she said, her voice hardening into something I'd heard her use in boardrooms. "Let's be honest then. Let's tell everyone the truth about our marriage." She turned to address the guests, directly transforming into the powerful executive they all knew. "You've lived in my home, spent my money, enjoyed my success for 3 decades. She said, each word precisely aimed. "And this is how you repay me, with paranoid accusations about simple estate planning." Murmurs from the crowd, some sympathetic to her, some uncertain. "I've supported you," she continued, warming to her performance. "Given you everything, a beautiful home, financial security status in Palm Beach society. You contribute nothing but domestic maintenance while I build empires." Solene moved to stand beside her, a show of solidarity. "And now, when I try to formalize our partnership properly, When I try to give you real ownership of what we've built together, you accuse me of what exactly theft of my own assets. She laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. Nothing has been free here, Lawrence, she said, her voice dropping to something colder. Everything you have, I gave you. Everything you are, I made you. Several guests nodded. This narrative made sense to them, the powerful woman, and her kept husband ungrateful and paranoid. The safe combination in your office? Celeste continued, gesturing dismissively. The one you thought was so secret I've known it for years. How else could I manage our financial affairs when you're clearly incapable? Oh, she stopped, realizing what she'd just admitted. I'd never given her that combination. Never once in 32 years. Which meant she'd watch me open it, memorize the numbers, access my private documents without permission. The guests who understood what that meant shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should call Dr. Morrison, Celine interjected quickly. Lawrence has been under considerable stress lately. These kinds of paranoid delusions. You're right, Celeste, I interrupted, my voice calm and clear. Nothing is free. Let me show our guests what you've been purchasing with my identity. I pulled out my phone, thumbed to the photo gallery Dashiell had prepared. This is my wife and her executive assistant at the Breakers Hotel, November 18th, I said, holding up the screen so nearby guests could see. Business meeting, I assume. The photo showed Celeste and Celine on a hotel balcony, champagne glasses, raised bodies angled toward each other with unmistakable intimacy. Celine's hand rested on Celeste's shoulder. Their faces were close, laughing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Have you ever watched someone realize their entire social position is disintegrating in real time? It starts with the eyes, a widening, a sudden clarity, then the mouth opening slightly. Finally, the body leaning back as if the truth itself has physical force. I swiped to the next image. And this is the insurance authorization with my forged signature filed 3 days ago without my knowledge. Notice the timestamp, 9:47 a.m. December 4th. I was at the villa all morning. Someone cloned my digital identity to sign this remotely. More phones appeared in the crowd, now guests photographing my phone screen, documenting the evidence. That could be doctored, Celine said, her voice sharp with desperation. Digital evidence is easily manipulated. Dashiell, I called toward the study. Would you confirm the chain of custody for our guests? My son appeared in the doorway, laptop open, his face professionally neutral. Everything my father is showing you has been stored on encrypted servers with blockchain timestamps, Dashiell said, turning the laptop to display streams of data. The photographs, the documents, the authentication logs, all independently verifiable and admissible in court. He pulled up another screen. We also have live surveillance footage from today's party, he continued. Every conversation, every interaction time-stamped and preserved, including Mrs. Sinclair's statements about signing documents on my father's behalf because he's incapable of understanding them. The crowd had gone silent, horrified fascination replacing champagne warmth. I swiped to another photo, Celeste and Celine, at a restaurant at a resort at what looked like Celine's apartment. A pattern of intimacy spanning months, maybe years. In one image, Celine wore a distinctive gold bracelet delicate with small diamonds. Is that, a woman's voice from the crowd sharp with recognition, the tech sector woman in diamonds? That's the bracelet you showed us last year, Celeste, the anniversary gift from Lawrence. Celeste went white. You told us it was so romantic? The woman continued louder now. How Lawrence had it custom made. Truth is a demolition charge, silent until the moment it detonates, then nothing remains but rubble and witnesses. Hey, this is insane, Celeste said, but her voice had lost its power. You're twisting everything, taking innocent photos and creating narratives. The affair is almost irrelevant, I said quietly. What matters is the systematic identity theft, the forged signatures, the attempted transfer of assets using my cloned credentials. Fraud, Celeste. Felony fraud. Guests were backing away now, creating distance, already calculating how to position themselves in the scandal that was clearly about to explode across Palm Beach society. As guests crowded closer to see the evidence on my phone, Celeste's champagne glass shattered on the terrace stones. She lunged forward, reaching not for me, but for my phone, her face twisted into something I'd never seen before. All pretense abandoned, nothing left but raw desperation and rage. You have no idea what you've just done, she hissed, her fingers clawing toward the device that held her destruction. I held the phone above my head as Celeste's manicured nails reached for it and nodded once to Dashiell across the terrace. He pressed send. Package sent, Dashiell announced loud enough for every guest to hear. Confirmed receipt by legal counsel and financial institutions. Celeste froze mid-lunge, her face cycling through shock rage and something close to terror. Like, what did you just... She started. My phone rang. I answered on speaker, holding it where everyone could hear. Mr. Sinclair, this is Teresa Henderson from First Palm Trust. Her voice was professional formal, carrying the weight of institutional authority. AML compliance hold is now active on all accounts pending investigation of unauthorized transactions. All access has been suspended as of this moment. Yes, thank you, Ms. Henderson, I said calmly. Please proceed with the freeze protocols we discussed. Already in progress. You'll receive written confirmation within the hour. The federal compliance team has been notified and will be reaching out directly. I ended the call. 50 guests stood in complete silence, phones forgotten, champagne forgotten, witnessing the systematic demolition of Celeste Sinclair's empire in real time. You can't send that, Celeste's voice cracked on the words desperation bleeding through. We had an agreement. The terrace went even quieter if that was possible. An agreement between the house husband and the CEO. About what exactly? I let the question hang in the air, watching several guests make the connection. If there was an agreement, then Celeste knew far more about my corporate identity than she'd ever let on, which meant her fraud wasn't opportunistic desperation. It was targeted theft, planned and premeditated. What agreement was the darling? I asked softly. The one where you steal everything while I pretend not to notice, or the one where I disappear and you inherit it all? She opened her mouth, closed it, calculating too late that every word was being recorded, documented, witnessed. I turned to address the guest directly. Let me correct a misconception, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the terrace. The empire Celeste mentioned, I built it. The corporate holdings she manages, I own them. The anonymous chairman she reports to. I paused, letting them see me, really see me for the first time. You're looking at him. Gasps, whispers. Phones appeared again this time, recording rather than photographing. That's impossible, Celeste whispered. You're just the house husband, I finished gently. That was always the point, wasn't it? You never asked why a man with my education chose domesticity. Stanford MBA, 40 years of corporate strategy, experience anonymous controlling shareholder of a company worth $500 million. I moved closer to her, my voice dropping but still audible to our captive audience. You assumed weakness, fatal mistake. The moment you stop being invisible is the moment you become invincible. The policy you tried to transfer, I continued. My life insurance protecting my assets, the corporate shares you filed to access my voting rights controlling my company, the authorization you forged, my signature, my identity, my legal standing. I pulled up another document on my phone. Every transaction, every forged signature, every unauthorized access documented, time-stamped, and now in the hands of federal investigators. Identity theft, wire fraud, attempted grand larceny, each one a felony. Celeste's face had gone chalk white, her perfect composure completely shattered. Solene stepped forward, trying to salvage something. This is coercion. You're manipulating the situation, creating false narratives. Temporary restraining order was filed at 8:30 this morning. I interrupted, my tone matter of fact. Granted by Judge Patricia Crane at noon, your authorization void, your access to my accounts terminated, your conspiracy documented with blockchain verification and sworn testimony. Desmond Stafford stepped forward from the crowd, shedding his friendly guest persona like a coat. Mr. Sinclair, he said formally, as your attorney of record, I confirm all filings are complete and recorded with the Palm Beach County courts. The emergency injunction is in full effect. Several guests backed away further, realizing they'd been witnesses not to an anniversary celebration, but to a carefully orchestrated legal trap. You know what's louder than 50 people gasping? 50 people understanding they've witnessed a perfect trap. The beautiful part, I said, looking directly at Celeste, is that you helped me build the case. Every humiliating comment tonight about signing documents for me, managing my affairs without authorization, treating me as mentally incompetent, all recorded, all admissible, all proving fraudulent intent. I gestured to the villa behind us, the mansion glowing with warm light against the evening sky. This house you've been hosting parties in for 32 years. title is solely in my name, held in the anonymous trust you never bothered to investigate. The cars in the garage, the art on the walls, the furniture you're so proud of, all mine. Celeste swayed slightly, grabbing Celine's arm for support. You've been the guest all along, I said quietly. Not the other way around. The full scope of it hit her visibly, the money she'd spent, the status she'd claimed, the empire she'd managed but never owned. All of it built on my assets, my wealth, my carefully constructed anonymity. So tell me, my dear wife, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the silent terrace. Did you want me to disappear for the money, or because I've been silent too long? Celeste's face drained of all color as the magnitude crashed down. She turned to Celine, whose hand was already moving toward her phone. Celine, she whispered, desperate. Call Marcus. Call him now. I smiled. Marcus Holloway. Your litigation specialist. I let the pause extend, watching hope flicker in her eyes before I extinguished it. I'm afraid he's been disbarred as of this afternoon. Shall I explain why? The silence after I mentioned Marcus's disbarment lasted exactly 3 heartbeats before Celeste understood she was completely alone. Marcus authenticated documents he knew were forged. I said, my voice carrying clearly across the terrace. Filed notarizations for signatures he witnessed me never sign, submitted false affidavits to financial institutions. That's grounds for immediate disbarment. Celeste turned to Celine, her face a mask of disbelief. You said Marcus could protect us. You said he had everything covered. He thought he did, I said before Celine could answer. Until Desmond filed the bar complaint this afternoon with complete evidence of his involvement. Desmond stepped forward, his professional demeanor absolute. The bar complaint was filed at 2 p.m. today with full evidence. He confirmed. His license was suspended pending investigation by 4 p.m. Mr. Holloway is currently facing criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and professional misconduct. Criminal charges! Celeste's voice cracked. He was paid $250,000, I said, watching her face. Wire transfer from an offshore account you control dated November 12th. Payment for legal services rendered specifically providing professional cover for identity theft and financial fraud. The number hit the guests like a physical blow. $250,000. This wasn't impulsive crime. This was calculated finance, professionally orchestrated theft. That's not I never. Celeste started, but the words died as she realized every denial was another lie captured by surveillance, witnessed by 50 people, documented for prosecution. My phone rang again. I answered on speaker. Mr. Sinclair, this is Teresa Henderson from First Palm Trust. Her voice was formal, final. First Palm Trust has placed a comprehensive hold on all accounts associated with the flagged authorization. Federal banking investigators will contact you within 48 hours. And the insurance policy beneficiary change, I asked. Avoid pending investigation. All previous beneficiary designations remain in effect. Any new changes require in-person verification with 2 forms of government identification and legal counsel present. Additionally, any transactions over $50,000 now require dual authentication and supervisory approval. Thank you, Ms. Henderson. The bank is cooperating fully with all federal and state investigators. You should expect contact from the FBI Financial Crimes Division within the week. FBI. The word rippled through the crowd like electricity. I ended the call and looked at Celeste. Her perfect composure had completely shattered. Mascara streaked her cheeks. Her hands trembled. Watching an empire collapse is like watching a building demolition. It happens in seconds, but you can see the precise moment the support beams fail. The 32 years, she whispered, her voice breaking. 32 years I've built this life, and you're destroying it in one evening. You destroyed it, I corrected gently. I'm just making sure everyone sees the rubble. Celine had been silent through the bank notification, her face calculating, running through options with visible desperation. Then she made her choice. She stepped away from Celeste, physically moved 3 feet to the side, creating visible distance between them. Mr. Sinclair? She said, her voice steady and professional. I need to make something clear. I was following Mrs. Sinclair's explicit instructions as her employee. I had no idea she was forging your signature or committing fraud. Celeste's head snapped toward her. Celine, what are you? She told me the authorizations were legitimate. Celine continued speaking directly to me and ignoring Celeste completely. that you'd given verbal permission but were too busy with domestic matters to handle the paperwork yourself. That's a lie. Celeste's voice rose desperate. We planned this together. You said, I have no knowledge of any plan. Celine said, her tone flat emotionless. I was an employee following what I believed were legitimate instructions from my employer. She turned to Desmond. I'm willing to provide full testimony regarding Mrs. Sinclair's instructions and actions, she said. I believe I have rights to immunity as a cooperating witness. Desmond's expression didn't change. That would be a matter for the prosecutor's office, but cooperation is typically viewed favorably. Have you ever seen someone realize their lover was never actually on their side? Celeste stared at Celine with absolute devastation, not just betrayal, but the sudden understanding that everything between them had been tactical, strategic, self-preserving, rather than genuine. You're lying, Celeste said, her voice small, now pleading. Celine, tell them the truth. Tell them we were together. Tell them... Together? Celine's laugh was cold. Mrs. Sinclair, I think your stress has caused some confused thinking. Our relationship was strictly professional. Any personal friendship you imagined was wishful thinking on your part. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a manila folder, handing it to Desmond with practiced efficiency. Email documentation of Mrs. Sinclair's explicit instructions, Celine said. Dated back 6 months, also recordings of conversations where she detailed the authorization process and instructed me to facilitate document signatures. The folder exchanged hands. Celeste went white. You recorded me. I document all business conversations with supervisors, Celine said smoothly. Standard professional practice to protect myself from liability. It's fortunate I did given the circumstances. She'd been documenting everything, for months, building her exit strategy while Celeste believed they were building a future together. The ultimate betrayal wrapped in the language of professional self-preservation. You told me you loved me, Celeste whispered. I told you what you wanted to hear, Celine corrected. You were my employer and my ticket to financial security, nothing more. As Celine handed her evidence folder to Desmond, Celeste lunged at her, not with violence, but with desperation, grabbing her arm. You can't, Celeste whispered, tears streaming freely now. Celine, please. I love you. Celine looked at her with complete indifference, pulled her arm free with casual ease, and said the words that finished the demolition. Love doesn't pay legal fees, darling. The first thing Celeste did the next morning was try her credit card at the coffee shop, and the word declined echoed louder than the espresso machine. I knew because Dashiell's surveillance team was still active, documenting her movements for the investigation. She'd left the villa at dawn, slept somewhere else, maybe a hotel, maybe Celine's apartment, before realizing that door was permanently closed. She returned to the villa at 8:47 a.m., her face drawn still, wearing yesterday's clothes. My cards don't work, she said, finding me in the study. Her voice was frantic, disbelieving. My email is locked. The office security wouldn't let me in. What did you do? I removed fraud risks from company systems, I said calmly, not looking up from the documents Desmond had delivered that morning. Standard security protocol when internal theft is detected. You can't just... She stopped, breathing hard. I built that company with you. You managed a company I own, I corrected. Past tense. Your employment was terminated by unanimous board vote at 7 a.m. this morning. She tried her phone, stabbing at the screen with trembling fingers. Email access denied. Corporate portal locked. Company credit cards canceled. Then she tried something else, her personal banking app. The one connected to accounts she thought were hers, separate from the company independent wealth she'd accumulated over 3 decades. The balance showed 0. That's my money, she whispered. It was company compensation, I said, funded through corporate accounts. When those accounts were frozen, pending fraud investigation, all derivative transactions were suspended as well. She looked up at me, and I saw the moment she understood. Even her supposedly independent wealth had never actually been hers. It was all connected to the empire I owned, the company I controlled, the anonymous chairman position she'd never bothered to investigate. She'd built her life on my foundation and never realized she was standing on sand. This is insane, she said, her voice rising. You're overreacting. Yes, I made mistakes, but we can fix this quietly. I'll return everything. We'll restructure the accounts properly. No one needs to know. The 50 people know, I interrupted. Plus the bank, the federal investigators, the bar association, and the corporate board. It's not a secret anymore, Celeste. It's a documented crime. She switched tactics, her face softening into something meant to be appealing. 32 years, she said, moving closer. We've been married for 32 years. That has to count for something. You can't just throw away everything we built together over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding worth $100 million, I said. Plus identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Those aren't misunderstandings. They're felonies. The exact moment someone realizes they have nothing left sounds like silence. She stood there, mouth open, no words coming out, as the full scope of her situation crystallized. Then the rage came. "I'll destroy you," she hissed. "I'll tell everyone who you really are. I'll expose the chairman identity. I'll make sure every business partner, every investor, every media outlet knows you've been hiding behind anonymity for decades. You'll lose everything too." I looked at her with something close to pity. "That's the 50 witnesses from last night already know," I said. "It's no longer a secret, just a fact. And threatening to expose information that's already public only makes you look more desperate." The study door opened. Desmond entered carrying a leather portfolio, his expression professionally neutral. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said formally, "any further threats constitute witness intimidation. I'm documenting this conversation, and any additional attempts at coercion will be included in the criminal referral." Celeste's face went white. Desmond opened the portfolio on my desk, spreading documents across the mahogany surface. "A civil complaint filed this morning with Palm Beach County courts," he said, pointing to the first document. "We're seeking full restitution plus damages for attempted theft of assets valued at $100 million, plus punitive damages for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty." He moved to the next document. Criminal referral to federal prosecutors for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. The FBI Financial Crimes Division has confirmed they're opening a formal investigation. Terrence entered behind him, carrying his own folder of financial forensics. Corporate board voted unanimously to terminate Mrs. Sinclair's positions and revoke all company access, Terrence said, effective immediately. Additionally, we've frozen her compensation pending investigation of irregularities. Irregularities, Celeste's voice was hollow. Your compensation over the past decade, Terrence said, opening his folder. We found systematic inflation of salary, fabricated expense reports, and unauthorized bonuses. Total misappropriation approximately $3.2 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. She hadn't just tried to steal the insurance policy. She'd been stealing steadily, quietly for years. Legal proceedings are like glaciers. Once they start moving, they're unstoppable, and everything in their path gets crushed into dust. What happens now? Celeste asked, her voice barely audible. Desmond laid out the final documents, a timeline of legal proceedings, estimated court dates, potential criminal penalties. 5 to 15 years for wire fraud. 2 to 10 years for identity theft. Consecutive sentencing possible. Civil judgments that would bankrupt her completely. Professional reputation destroyed beyond repair. I signed each document methodically while Celeste watched. The civil complaint, the criminal referral, the corporate termination paperwork. Each signature made it more real, more inevitable, more institutional. As Desmond gathered the signed documents, Celeste looked at me with something approaching clarity, the desperate calculation of someone with no cards left to play. You're going to have me arrested, aren't you? She asked quietly. I paused, setting down my pen. Then I shook my head. No, Celeste, I said, meeting her eyes. I'm going to give you a choice. The choice I offered Celeste wasn't mercy. It was the difference between justice and cruelty, and I'd spent too long being silent to become cruel now. You can walk away from this with your freedom, I said, gesturing for her to sit. She remained standing, swaying slightly. No criminal record, a chance to rebuild somewhere else. But you sign everything you leave quietly, and you never contact me again. Desmond placed a document packet on the desk between us. Settlement agreement, divorce petition, financial restitution plan. The terms are specific, I continued. Immediate divorce, no alimony, no claims on any assets. You repay the $3.2 million in embezzled funds over 10 years through automatic payroll deduction from whatever employment you secure. You sign a full confession for the civil case admitting all fraud allegations, and you disappear. Celeste's voice came out hollow. And if I refuse? Desmond answered before I could. As federal prosecutors are waiting for Mr. Sinclair's decision, he said evenly. Wire fraud across state lines carries 20 years maximum. Identity theft adds another 15. Conspiracy to commit grand larceny is 5 to 25 years. Sentences can run consecutively. The numbers settled over her like snow, accumulating until the weight becomes unbearable. You have 48 hours to decide, I said. Sign the settlement or I authorize the criminal referral. There is no third option. The restitution, Celeste said, her voice cracking. Where does it go? To the employees whose pension contributions you embezzled over the years, I said, watching her face. Terrence traced the funds. You didn't just inflate your compensation, you systematically diverted pension, matching that should have gone to 300 workers. The restitution makes them whole. She'd stolen from people who trusted her, who believed their retirement was secure, who thought she was protecting their interests. She closed her eyes. At 48 hours, I repeated. She left without another word, and I listened to her footsteps recede down the marble hallway. Desmond gathered the unsigned documents, his expression thoughtful. You have every legal and moral right to pursue maximum criminal penalties, he said. Why show restraint? Oh, I moved to the window, looking out over the villa grounds where 50 witnesses had watched my marriage end 2 nights ago. Because 300 employees shouldn't read about their company in a fraud scandal, I said. Because I spent 32 years building something, and I won't let her destroy it on the way out. Because justice doesn't require humiliation to be real. When did we decide that justice requires cruelty to be real? The truth is documented, I continued. The assets are protected. The victims will be compensated. Sending her to prison for 20 years doesn't add anything except my own satisfaction, and I've never been interested in that kind of satisfaction. Desmond was quiet for a long moment. You're a better man than most would be in your position, he said finally. I'm just tired of being invisible for the wrong reasons, I replied. I was silent to protect what I built. Now I'm choosing not to destroy for the same reason. That evening, Dashiell found me on the villa terrace watching the sun paint the Atlantic in shades of amber and rose. He sat in the chair beside me, 2 glasses of scotch in hand, and passed me one without speaking. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, father and son, watching the day end. You could have ruined her completely, Dashiell said finally. Made her a national scandal, federal trial media circus complete destruction. Why didn't you? I considered the question, swirling the scotch in my glass. Because I didn't spend 3 decades building a life to throw it away on revenge, I said. The truth is enough. It always is. Even when the truth leaves her free. She's not free, I said quietly. She'll spend 10 years repaying stolen money, living with the knowledge that everyone who matters knows what she did. Her career is over. Her reputation is destroyed. Her lover betrayed her. And she has to live with all of that while I move on. Revenge is a fire that burns everything, including the hand holding the match. Truth is the light that just shows what was always there. That seems harder than prison, Dashiell observed. It is, I agreed. Prison has a release date. This doesn't. We watched a pelican dive into the waves, emerging with silver fish flashing in its beak. You know why I stayed anonymous all these years? I asked. Dashiell looked at me, curious. I assumed it was about control, privacy, protection from people like Celeste. Partially, I admit it, but mostly it was about you. Me. I wanted you to have the choice, I said. To inherit the empire on your own terms, free from the burden of expectation. If everyone knew I was the chairman from the beginning, you'd have grown up as the heir apparent. Every decision you made would have been measured against that inheritance. I met his eyes. The invisibility was always about protecting your freedom, I said. So you could become whoever you wanted to be before you had to decide whether to become me. Dashiell was quiet, processing. Thank you, he said finally, his voice thick, for giving me that. Remember this, Dashiell, I said, placing my hand on his shoulder. You don't need to get your hands dirty. Keep the truth clean. That's the legacy. We sat together as the sun touched the horizon, the sky burning gold and crimson. What happens now? Dashiell asked. With you, I mean, now that everyone knows who you are. I smiled because I'd been thinking about that question for 2 days, turning it over in my mind like a stone that might reveal something precious underneath. Now, I said, I get to decide who I want to be when I'm not invisible anymore. The villa felt larger when it was empty, every room echoing with the silence of things that were finally permanently over. 1 week had passed since the anniversary party that ended my marriage. 7 days since 50 witnesses watched Celeste's empire collapse. 168 hours since I stopped being invisible. Dashiell found me in the study packing the last of my books into cardboard boxes. A Desmond called, he said. Celeste signed the final settlement documents yesterday. She's already gone. I nodded, sliding another volume into the box. Where? Arizona, Scottsdale, new name, new life. First restitution payment cleared this morning. And the company, I asked. Terrence says employee morale is actually up, Dashiell said, leaning against the doorframe. Transparency about the fraud attempt and your identity made people trust the leadership more, not less. 3 clients called to express support. 2 new contracts signed this week. The truth had done what silence never could. It had built trust. Celine, I asked. Immunity granted in exchange for full cooperation. She's testifying in the Marcus Holloway disbarment proceedings. After that, she disappears too. The quiet machinery of justice proceeding without drama or spectacle. No sensational trial, no media circus. Just documented truth and consequences delivered with institutional efficiency. Exactly as it should be. I sealed the box and looked around the study. 32 years of my life had passed in this room, and I was leaving with 6 boxes of books, a folder of photographs, and complete freedom. I bought a house, I said. I know, the realtor called to confirm closing. No, I corrected. I bought it under my own name. Not a trust, not an LLC, not an anonymous holding company, just Lawrence Sinclair, visible and present. Dashiell smiled. First public property ownership in 3 decades. First of many things, I agreed. We moved through the villa room by room, collecting only what mattered. Photographs of Dashiell as a child, my father's watch, books I'd read and reread, a painting my mother had loved. I left behind everything that represented the old performance, the gilded cage of Palm Beach society, the house husband persona, the invisible life I'd constructed to protect what I built. The villa would sell within weeks. Some other couple would fill it with their own carefully constructed illusions, their own performances, their own secrets. I wish them better luck than I'd had. 32 years in this house, Dashiell said, as we loaded the last box into his car. Are you really okay just walking away? I looked back at the villa, white stucco and Spanish tile, perfectly manicured grounds, ocean view worth $30 million. I'm not walking away from anything, I said. I'm walking towards something. There's a difference. Freedom isn't the absence of chains. It's walking away from the person who convinced you to wear them willingly. What comes next? Dashiell asked. For you? I climbed into the passenger seat, watching the villa shrink as we pulled away. The truth is, I don't entirely know, I admitted. But I know what I'm done with hiding who I am to make someone else comfortable. Performing domesticity while building empires in secret. Being invisible to protect myself from people who should never have had access to me in the first place. We drove in comfortable silence for several miles, the Palm Beach mansions giving way to highway, the ocean disappearing behind us. I scheduled my first public board meeting as the named chairman. I said, 2 weeks from now, no more anonymous votes, no more hidden proxy authorities, just me visible and accountable. How does that feel? Dashiell asked. Yet terrifying, I admitted. Liberating, both at once. The rearview mirror showed the villa disappearing behind palms and ocean mist, and I felt nothing but relief. I want you there, I continued, at the board meeting, as my successor in training, if you're interested. Dashiell glanced at me surprised. You're offering me the company. Eventually, when you're ready, when you've decided that's what you want, not because I built it, but because you want to build it further. The choice I tried to protect for you all these years. He was quiet processing. I'd like that, he said finally. Working with you, learning from you, building something together instead of in parallel. Then that's what we'll do, I said. In the light, where people can see us. We merged onto I-95, heading north the highway, stretching toward futures neither of us had fully imagined yet. No regrets about how it ended, Dashiell asked. With Celeste, with the scandal, with everything becoming public. I thought about the question, carefully watching the Florida landscape blur past. None, I said. Nothing is free, especially betrayal, and the price always comes due on the day it's supposed to come. The words felt true, final, complete. She paid hers, Dashiell observed. And I earned mine, I said. Freedom, visibility, the chance to stop performing and start living. We drove for another hour in companionable silence, each lost in our own thoughts about what came next. As we crossed the state line into Georgia, Dashiell asked the question I'd been waiting for. Yes, are you scared? He said. To finally be visible after all these years, to have people know who you really are. I thought about it, really, thought about it turning the question over in my mind like a stone examined in sunlight. No, I said and meant it completely. I'd spent 32 years being invisible to everyone except myself. I knew who I was. I knew what I'd built. I knew my own worth. I looked at my son, seeing the understanding in his eyes. Now, I said, the world can finally see what I'd always known was there. And to you listening to my story, remember this silence isn't always golden. I spent 32 years being invisible, protecting what I built while someone I trusted was stealing it. Don't make my mistake. Don't confuse silence with strength. I thought staying hidden was strategic, but what I was really doing was giving someone the perfect opportunity to betray me without consequences. Here's what I learned, and I pray you never have to learn it the hard way. Justice delayed comes with a cost. Every day I stayed silent, I paid for it in peace and trust. I believe God put me through this to teach me that truth isn't just about being right, it's about being free. Clean truth spoken with dignity is more powerful than revenge. You don't need to destroy someone to stop them from destroying you. You just need to stop being invisible. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment. Have you ever had to choose between revenge and justice, between exposing someone publicly or handling things quietly? If you know someone who needs this message about truth and timing, please share it. And if you appreciate stories about dignity in difficult moments, consider subscribing. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters. Please note, while this story contains fictionalized details for narrative impact, the lesson about choosing truth over silence is real.